The Naruto world is full of twists and turns, but what if things had played out differently? What if Naruto was trained to be a shinobi without emotion? Today, we dive into another epic alternate story in the Naruto universe. Welcome to Hirosaki Waiti, where we reimagine the shinobi world one what if at a time. Get ready for an exciting journey, let's jump right in. 6 years after the Fourth Ninja War, the world still isn't peaceful. What will Konoha do against an unknown enemy with strange powers and a familiar enemy who is still after revenge when their overworked trump card is sick of being used, irritated by Konoha's hypocrisy, and tired of the endless fighting? Chapter 1, Introduction, Sakura Sealed. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto. This is fanfiction, after all. Official start, 6 years after canon, aka, after Kyubi, 22, January 2nd. Konoha General Hospital, Konoha, January 2nd, aka 22. I can't take no for an answer. You don't understand. I have to help her. Sorry, there's just nothing I can do. Medical ninjutsu tells me that this is a vegetative state and my clan techniques confirm the diagnosis. And her condition is getting worse. I don't think she'll survive the night. No. Aren't you one of the best medics in the entire village? Do something. Shikamaru closed his eyes as a blonde black-clad boy wearing a white cloak depicting his sage status grabbed a sobbing Ino by the shoulders and shook her repeatedly. Normally, Shikamaru would have told his friend to calm down, but Shikamaru knew that this was Naruto's way of showing grief. Naruto! Ino yelled back, in tears. Sakura may be your girlfriend, but she is my best friend. Don't you think I would do something if I could? Even if Lady Tsunade were still alive, she wouldn't be able to do anything to help. It's almost as impossible as bringing a dead person back to life. Gaara died. And he's still alive. There must be. Naruto, Shikamaru interjected. Naruto was beginning to spout nonsense. Shikamaru knew that it was time to get involved before Naruto started suggesting forbidden techniques. Many evil ninjas had started their walk down the path to darkness with the best of intentions. You know as well as I do that the technique Lady Chiyo used was a forbidden technique. Unless you're asking Ino to exchange her life for Sakura's, you might want to stop this. This isn't just hard on you, it's hard on all of us. You're hardly the only person in the village who cares about Sakura. But. The blonde sage retorted before falling silent. Shikamaru slowly nodded in approval as Naruto calmed down. Shikamaru had to admit that Naruto matured a great deal over the last 6 years. He figured it was the gauntlet of high-rank missions that Naruto was constantly sent on. Seeing people regularly die and seeing the bloody unwanted ramifications of words said in a heated fit of anger were the fastest, although not necessarily the easiest, way for a person to mature. Sorry, Ino, Naruto said in a low tone. I should have been more mature about this by now. After all of us know the risks of being a ninja. Ino gave the other blonde a hug. But your concern and compassion for others makes you who you are. That's not a bad thing, Naruto. I'm just glad that Sakura has a caring boyfriend like you. Wham! The door swung open, revealing a breathless Kakashi and Shizune. I heard the news from Naruto's clone and I came as soon as I could. What happened? The masked ninja asked without preamble. More details. Shikamaru nodded at Naruto to signal for him to elaborate. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura and I got into an argument and she had just left my place. It had been around 30 minutes since she left when I heard her scream from a few blocks away. I rushed out and found her entire body covered with seals. I managed to disrupt the sealing from taking complete effect, but after that Sakura just fell down and didn't move. Naruto recounted. Shikamaru grimaced in trepidation. Naruto sounded rather calm, but there was hurt and anger just beneath the surface. Naruto clearly felt that he was partially to blame since he and Sakura had gotten into an argument that had Sakura running outside late at night. Shikamaru didn't know who the culprit was, but the culprit would not get to live for long once Naruto got his hands on him or her. And the prognosis? The sixth Hokage looked at Ino, the village's master, in his mind. Ino shook her head. She might as well be dead, Lord Hokage. Her brain is a complete mess. I checked with both medical ninjutsu and my clan ninjutsu. Kakashi nodded. I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to ask Shizune to take a quick look as well. It can't hurt to have another opinion. Kakashi signaled for the medic to run through some diagnostic tests. Sorry, guys, Naruto interrupted sadly, but I think I'm going to go back home since there's nothing I can do here. I'll be back in the morning, Kakashi nodded. I'll be here then to give you an update. Let's hope that she survives the night. Naruto didn't comment on that. Shikamaru watched as Naruto just slipped by them to leave the room with his head down. You're taking it better than I thought, Shikamaru commented to the Hokage after the door closed. Even if you're the Hokage and have to look at all of your subordinates equally, she's still your student. Well, it wouldn't be the first time I had someone close to me pass away before their time, Kakashi said grimly. I suppose you could say that I'm used to it by now. He looked towards the door. It's probably much harder on Naruto. Lord Hiruzen, Lord Jiraiya, Lady Tsunade, Shonen Yumano, and now Sakura. I'm worried that he's going to have no one he's close with in the village. There's you, Shikamaru pointed out with a frown. Don't sell yourself short. You know Naruto cares a lot about you, perhaps, the Hokage allowed. Nonetheless, I'm still concerned about his state of mind. About that, Ino stood up and wiped away her tears. Shikamaru narrowed his eyes when her eyes went hard. Ino only got that look on the most dangerous of missions. Something about Naruto's story doesn't add up. What do you mean? Kakashi inquired. Are you saying he lied? Naruto has definitely matured in the last 6 years, but he's still very open and emotional when it comes to Sakura. I doubt he could hide his feelings. Since when did Naruto let Sakura walk back home by herself? Ino demanded. Even when they weren't dating, he always followed around her like a guard dog. It doesn't matter if they were fighting. He would have tried to apologize to her the entire way back. Shikamaru closed his eyes to think. That was true. Naruto hated it when others thought he needed support or protection and would lash out angrily. But Naruto himself always treated those around him like fragile pieces of art that needed to be handled with the utmost care. Despite Sakura being the strongest kunoichi in the village, Naruto made her protection as one of his top priorities. It was a poorly kept secret that Sakura acted annoyed but was secretly delighted with all the coddling. You're right, Shikamaru admitted. At the very least, he would have sent a clone along with Sakura. Even assuming Naruto genuinely forgot, what are the chances that Sakura would be attacked the one moment that Naruto took his eyes off of her? I am assuming that's why you lied to all of us about Sakura's mental state? Shizun looked up from Sakura. Sakura's perfectly fine as far as physical health. Mentally, she just appears as if she's asleep. Ino crossed her arms. When I used my mind-body dive technique on Sakura, I noticed that her consciousness was locked away with a seal. It was incredibly advanced fuinjutsu and covered extremely well with a genjutsu that made her appear as if she was brain dead. I don't know what exactly happened, but something seems wrong about this entire situation. Fuinjutsu? Naruto did mention seals earlier, Kakashi murmured. The sixth walked over to the pink-haired woman lying on the bed. Here, take me in with you. I'll try to see if I can break it. There was only silence for a few minutes as the two entered Sakura's mind. Nope, Kakashi said as he opened his eyes. There's nothing I can do. Whoever put this on her is definitely a master at the sealing arts. It's too risky to try and disrupt the seal. It might destroy her mind if we tamper with it carelessly. Are you saying Naruto placed this on her? Shizun asked incredulously as Ino opened her eyes as well. Naruto doesn't even know fuinjutsu. And we know that Naruto loves Sakura. He'd give his life for her. Ino shook her head. No, I know that Naruto cares. I also did a mind-body dive on him without him knowing earlier when he was still here. He has no memory of hurting her. Naruto was distracted with thoughts of ramen just after Sakura left and forgot to follow her. Only Naruto. Kakashi muttered. Shikamaru could tell that Kakashi wanted to slap his forehead. Shikamaru didn't blame him. Who the hell liked ramen of all things so much that it would be more important than protecting a loved one? Even Naruto normally didn't have that short of an attention span. Unless, Shikamaru's eyes widened before understanding what Ino meant. Someone had put a genjutsu that disguised the seal inside Sakura's mind. You're saying someone put a genjutsu on Naruto to keep him out of the way? He asked suddenly. His old teammate nodded at him. Considering that the genjutsu made it appear like Sakura was cognitively dead for all practical purposes, I think someone was hoping that we'd pull the plug on her ourselves. It would be an easy and untraceable way of killing someone. No blood and no outside damages. The genjutsu and fuinjutsu would disappear the moment she was killed, leaving no chakra traces as well. Since it was obvious that the attacker made contact with Naruto, I felt it best to fool Naruto in hopes of getting the attacker to think that the ploy was a success. Shikamaru nodded in approval at her quick thinking. To trick the enemy, you often had to trick your own allies as well. I see, Kakashi said. I suppose this helps in other ways too. Naruto would be here all day and night until Sakura woke up if he didn't think she was going to die. Shikamaru agreed. Naruto would adhere to his never give up nindo and stay next to Sakura as a show of support, refusing any missions that would take him away from her side for more than a few hours. But given Naruto's strategic importance out on the field, it was bad for Konoha. This entire thing is just too troublesome, he muttered. Why do I have to think about the ramifications of every single event that goes on in our damn village? Kakashi didn't have to tell Shikamaru that it was because he was the ANBU commander. Shikamaru had a duty to ensure the protection of the village at all costs. He was the knight on the chessboard, often placed strategically and hard to predict, but ultimately a sacrifice for the village. His complaints were minor in comparison to what would have happened to the children and the future generations of people if Konoha fell. Still, Shikamaru hated keeping things from his friends, especially someone like Naruto who would never understand why. Naruto still had not completely forgiven Kakashi and the now deceased former leaders for keeping information about his heritage hidden. Kakashi gave a bitter chuckle. I understand you more than anyone else. But we don't have that kind of luxury. All four of them in the room knew what the sixth was talking about. There was a long pause. Shikamaru met Shizune's look. She wasn't too happy with this either but looked willing to comply for now. He sighed in resignation. Alright, I won't tell him. As of that moment, Sakura Haruno was officially dead. Hokage Monument, Konoha, January 2nd, AK-22. Love. What a foolish emotion. It makes us hope for the best and never be prepared for the worst, Naruto whispered as he stared out at the village. I really was an idiot for hoping that my love would cure all. In the end, people only care about themselves. In the end, no one truly loved him. They loved what they thought he was, protector of Konoha and someone who sacrificed everything for those precious to him. They didn't love who they thought he was, prankster and someone who jumped in before thinking about anything. And they didn't even know who he truly was. Underneath my ass, he snorted, they can't even see beneath one layer. He sighed as he looked up at the stars. No more. I don't think I want to love again. It just isn't worth it. He would die before he let himself be betrayed again. Chapter 2, Introduction. Enter Hanabi. 2 months later. Training grounds, Konoha, February 28, AK-22. Hanabi Hyuga was a powerful ninja. Despite being only 17 years old, she was one of the powerful 25 or so Konoha ninjas classified as A-ranked or higher in the data books. She could count the number of Konoha kunoichi stronger than her on one hand and still have fingers left over. Power was what continued to give her breathing room within her clan. It had saved her from getting sealed at a young age. It kept her father and the elders of the main house wary and respectful. Strength was what kept the danger away. She had always felt that the clan's ways and traditions were like a boa constrictor squeezing the life out of her. She would not live her life as a trapped bird or a cornered rat. She was strong. Despite her strength, however, she was not a natural genius like her late cousin. Her skills were earned through blood, sweat, and tears. It was this mindset that led Hanabi out of her clan compound and towards the normal training grounds. Once Niji had died in the war, Hanabi realized that her family's style of fighting was insufficient in the face of overwhelming power. Niji had been a genius of the gentle fist. There were even whispers that he was even more powerful than her father, especially since her father was out of practice. But even someone as skilled as Niji had perished in the war. The original gentle fist was a highly defensive style that forced the practitioner to move within a relatively small radius close to the ground. The mid-range 8 trigrams vacuum palm, her sister's unique protection of the 8 trigrams 64 palms technique, and a larger Kaiten radius somewhat extended the reach of the gentle fist user, but that did not change the fact that the gentle fist was highly limited. Hanabi initially tried to make simple modifications in the gentle fist techniques to make them less rigid and more fluid. Instead of using abrupt turns and sharp strikes, she flowed with her blows and used her agility to slide into her next move instead of pulling back. To allow her to fight even in the air, she added jumps and chakra-releasing kicks and jumps to give her more maneuverability. The last thing her enemies would see would be a captivating dance before their lives were cut short. Boom! She froze when she heard an explosion going off nearby in one of the training grounds. Her eyes narrowed and she turned her Byakugan on. No one trained at this time of the night, and especially not with loud and destructive ninjutsu. It probably was a fight. It took a few minutes and a couple more explosions before she arrived on training ground 7. She saw a blonde young man about to throw what looked like a chakra shuriken at one of the few trees remaining on that side of the training grounds. Given the appearance, it probably was the legendary wind release, Raisin Shuriken, the technique of the legendary toad sage Naruto Uzumaki, the clan head of the newest noble clan Uzumaki. Lord Uzumaki? Ah, the young man turned around and the ball of chakra dissipated. Hanabi saw markings disappear from his eyes. You're Hanabi, right? I was not aware that we were on a first-name basis, Lord Uzumaki, Hanabi answered in an irritated tone. She wasn't nearly the stickler for formality as her father was, but she still valued maintaining outward respect for others. Well, I give you permission now. You can call me Naruto. And I'll call you Hanabi. It would be strange to call you Hyuga since I'm familiar with some others in your clan. Lord Uzumaki, she said coolly, ignoring his displeased look. If he wanted to annoy her, then she would annoy him by disregarding his wishes. What are you doing out at this time? The immediate response was a deadpan look. What do you think? The sage said, pointing to the craters in the training grounds. I'm practicing my ninjutsu. At this time, she inquired, slightly surprised. She hadn't thought a legend like Sage Naruto would even need to practice. I highly doubt that this is a part of your regular training routine. Ah, well about that, Uzumaki's mood suddenly plummeted. I'm trying to distract myself. Distract yourself? Well, that, and let anyone who might be watching know that I have everything under control. She gave him a strange look. She wondered if it was an unspoken law that S-ranked ninjas had to have some kind of strange quirk. The sixth was an open pervert. And the teacher of her cousin's teammate Lee was rather unusual as well. How does destroying half a training ground with ridiculously dangerous ninjutsu at midnight convince anyone that you're in the right state of mind? Well, because I'm known to be rather brash and rowdy. One of my missions was successful, but ended up with a ton of collateral damage and took the lives of a few civilians that I had been protecting. If I went back home and acted as if nothing were wrong, Kakashi-sensei would never leave me alone. I'm fine and I understand that being a ninja is risky business, but they don't think I know that. By showing him the tantrum that he expects, I'll have to deal with fewer people trying to fuss over me. That made sense. Sort of. Although, Hanabi wondered why Uzumaki didn't bother trying to change the opinions of those around him instead of just reinforcing the negative reputation he had. It was almost as if he wanted to be known as an immature child. Well, anyway, enough of me. So little firecracker, what brings you out this late? Hanabi was jerked out of her thoughts. I'm not Firecracker, my name is Hanabi, Fireworks, she quipped immediately before realizing that the response just made her sound childish. She was tempted to glare as the sage laughed. Aren't you a cute little girl? But, you didn't answer my question. Well, Hanabi started out slowly. She didn't want to tell him about her training routine. She was trying to incorporate ninjutsu into her style to give it more range and versatility. The only problem was that her father and the elders would not be pleased. They strictly followed the Hyuga tradition of using purely the gentle fist to fight. Her modifications already were stretching the rules. So she decided to do her new training late at night and out in the training grounds instead of the clan compound so that no one would find out. So it would be bad if the news somehow got back to her clan. Aha! I know. You were doing something naughty. Uzumaki was crowned in victory. Hanabi controlled herself as best as she could, but she felt her face flush red in anger and embarrassment at the insinuation. Still, it was best if he thought she was doing something perverted rather than find out about her training. So she would further mislead him. Lord Uzumaki. She growled out. How and where I spend my nights is none of your business. The blonde ignored her comment. Ah, Hanabi is being a rebellious little teen, he cooed. She was about to retort angrily when the sage became completely serious. Don't worry, you can tell me. My lips are sealed. What? She looked at him incredulously. Did he think that she was going to tell him details about her love life just because he wasn't going to tell anyone else? Admittedly, being the daughter of an intimidating clan head and a princess of the strongest noble clan in the village, she had no love life, but she wasn't going to say that to anyone. Uzumaki rolled his eyes. Look, it's crystal clear that you're doing some kind of forbidden training that you don't want your clan finding out about. Hanabi was floored. Did the man read her mind? How? Did the man know how to read minds? She had given no indications that she was training or that she was trying to avoid detection by her clan. The mood suddenly became light again. Oh, I get it. You thought I implied you were doing something perverted, huh? She wanted to growl in frustration but settled for repeating her previous question politely. How did you know? If someone as notoriously unobservant as Uzumaki was able to find her out, then she needed to figure out where she went wrong. Wearing training garb with training gear, chakra levels at nearly full capacity, wide awake, heading towards the direction of training ground 41 before turning to come here. That couldn't be the case. Even if you were a censor, I wasn't even using chakra before I changed directions. Tell me the truth. How did you really know? Uzumaki grinned. Now that would be kissing and telling. In any case, like I said, my lips are sealed. I promise. And I never go back on my word. So don't feel too upset that you were caught. Uzumaki and his promises were famous throughout the village. There were rumors that because he used to house the greatest of the bijou, he was subject to the laws of demons. And there were plenty of old folklores saying that demons were unable to break their promises. Hanabi didn't really believe in any of those tales, but she knew that Uzumaki had never broken a single promise to date. Her secret was safe. It's not just that, Hanabi murmured softly, calming down with a few deep breaths. Oh? Uzumaki just raised an eyebrow. I'm also frustrated that I got caught. It just reminds me how far behind I am compared to a legend like you. The sage nodded. You're an elite in the ninja arts, one of the strongest in your clan's history. But you're trying to break out of the shell of an A rank and move into the territory of the masters. In strength, you seek to remove the shackles placed on you by your clan. In power, you hope to find freedom. Hanabi didn't even react to the comment. She figured by now that the sage was somehow able to read her mind. She would have to settle for not outwardly embarrassing herself. She was skilled at maintaining her distance from others behind a wall of formality, but the toad sage managed to tear that wall down in less than 10 minutes. She briefly wondered if this was why Hinata still had the tendency to blush brightly and even occasionally faint in front of the man. The toad sage just had a way of getting reactions out of people. There are many days that I wish I hadn't been born as a Hyuga. My sister has found her purpose in trying to fix our clan. But for me, I feel that the clan is preventing me from discovering my own purpose. Father tells me that the clan is everything and the bonds of family should be placed above all else, but... She trailed off. You want to be acknowledged as your own person. Uzumaki said knowingly. I understand how that feels. At first, people saw Kyubi instead of me. Eventually, they acknowledged me, but they saw me as the one holding a bijou. They saw me as an instrument of war. My life has been defined by that. Even now, they fail to see me as me. They see the Toad Sage, the apprentice of the Lord Jiraiya, the Uzumaki clan head, the son of the Yellow Flash, and the golden son of Konoha who led the Grand Alliance to victory in the Fourth Shinobi World War. Hanabi noticed something change in those blue eyes. She couldn't determine exactly what it was, but it reminded her of the first time she saw him. Flashback. Hanabi, pay close attention to this battle. Niji possesses the thickest Hyuga blood. His eyes surpass those of your sister. Even more than big sisters? Hanabi asked. Yes, and mostly even yours, her father replied. As her father had commanded, she paid close attention to the battle. but her eyes were drawn towards the orange-clad boy. The Hokage, she whispered. She looked at his body movements, his eyes, and the atmosphere around him. Even after he was hit with the 8 trigrams 64 palms and had no chakra flowing through his chakra points, he never lost his confidence. She heard some people laugh at the boy's bravado, but she noticed something different. She couldn't figure out what was drawing her attention to the boy, but she knew that there was more to this boy than what most people saw. Father, she tugged at her father's sleeve. Who is that boy that Niji is fighting? His name is Naruto Uzumaki. Be wary around him. Hanabi could certainly agree with that. There was just something odd about Uzumaki, even beyond the strange red chakra he was using to defeat her cousin. End flashback. Hanabi reflected on that. Perhaps that's what she saw in him all those years ago. A kindred spirit not only searching but also struggling to find an identity. Well. She snapped her attention back to him. Yes? Uzumaki was giving her an expectant look, but she didn't know what he wanted. Don't you think this is a grand opportunity? Uzumaki said with a happy look. The setting is perfect, with the nice calm evening wind and the moon is bright. Some would say that something magical could happen tonight. For a second, Hanabi just stood there as she processed his words. Then, she felt chakra raging around her hands and feet menacingly before realizing just who she was about to assault and calming down. Lord Uzumaki, don't you think you have better things to do than to make passes at someone you have only met a handful of times? She tried to say the words in the most polite way she could, but couldn't hold back the annoyed tone in her voice. Uzumaki ignored her and fixed her with a stare before circling around her like a hawk. Not bad. Not bad at all. You look quite flexible too. Hanabi found her self-control beginning to crumble. She was respectful and polite, but there was only blatant flirting she could take without retaliating in some manner. She snapped when she found him completely ignoring her and ogling at certain private areas of her body. She was wearing the traditional Hyuga training robe, which didn't show much at all, but it was the principle of the matter. She struck at him with chakra-coated feet and palms and took a stance as he jumped a few meters away with a small smile. 8 trigrams vacuum palm, she screamed out, trying to blast the pervert away. Her eyes widened as she felt a change in the atmosphere and saw the sage backhand the invisible pulse of chakra and knock it to the side where it detonated on a tree. What a ridiculously fierce aura. This feeling, she suddenly discovered that her breath was ragged from the incredible pressure around her. But that feeling disappeared as quickly as it came. The gentle fist techniques, the sage said in a serious tone, with the sole exception of the chakra-intensive kaiten, are most effective with direct contact. Aside from issues with lack of agility, which are resolved by a primarily defensive stance, there are nearly no flaws in the gentle fist, so a fight at close range with a gentle fist user is usually deadly. The only way to fight gentle fist users is to attack from distance, since they have neither the range nor the mobility to reach beyond a certain distance. Even if the attacks themselves do not work, the gentle fist user will eventually tire. Hanabi stood there stunned at his sudden change in attitude and his skill. Not only was he completely right about the weaknesses of the gentle fist style, the sage had initially been less than half a meter away from her, well within the fighting range of a Hyuga, and he had still taken no damage. She stammered. Okay, the sage smiled. I'll train you for tonight. We'll magically transform you into a kick-ass kunoichi by the morning. He frowned and put his finger to his chin before adding, not that you aren't already, of course. Ha? She was so confused that she was reduced to using one-word responses. Uzumaki looked at her and sighed dramatically. You're out here to train, right? I just got a glance at your stance, which tells me a lot about how you fight, and one of your signature techniques. I've thoroughly examined your body so I know what types of movements you are capable of. I'm offering you a rare chance to be trained by the Toad Sage. Isn't that great? But. She stammered again, weren't you flirting with me? Weren't you making comments about my body and how you wanted to, sleep with me? He looked confused at that and then smiled innocently before pointing at himself. Who? Me? She nodded dumbly. Nope, he said after thinking for a few seconds. Can't recall doing so. I remember commenting on the weather, saying that it's great for some magical training, and then commenting on your stance and physical condition. Flashback. Aha! I know. You were doing something naughty. Uzumaki was crowned in victory. Break, don't you think this is a grand opportunity? Uzumaki said with a happy look. The setting is perfect with the nice calm evening wind and the moon is bright. Some would say that something magical could happen tonight. Break! Uzumaki ignored her and fixed her with a stare before circling around her like a hawk. Not bad. Not bad at all. You look quite flexible too. Break! The mood suddenly became light again. Oh, I get it. You thought I implied you were doing something perverted, huh? End flashback. Hanabi groaned out loud, not even caring that she was in front of someone else. You tricked me again. The sage laughed at her. I have no idea what you're talking about. I did no such thing. You just have a dirty mind, accusing me of flirting when I was just trying to help you out. I wasn't expecting something like that, she pathetically said, ignoring his denial. Ninjas often spoke in doublespeak and triplespeak, so it was obvious that the man wasn't going to admit to anything openly. She held her head down in shame. The sage had been testing her and she hadn't even come close to passing. Uzumaki put his finger on his chin to think. Now, I'm assuming that you're trying to build upon your gentle fist rather than starting over from scratch. Judging from your strikes, it seems as if you developed a gentle fist style that incorporates jumps and kicks instead of only the traditional palm strikes. No offense, but your range still sucks and your ranged attacks suck even more. Hanabi looked glumly at the area that had been completely blasted to bits by her technique and pointed. That pathetic, huh? Not pathetic. She had expected to see him taunting her or making another annoying comment, but he was giving her a serious look, but not well suited to your style. There was a strange confidence in his words. The sage was stating things as if they were simple facts. She was confused. Almost everything she heard about the young toad sage seemed to be wrong. From the older generation she learned that he was brash, loud, immature, and disrespectful. From the younger generation, including Hinata, she learned that while he was incredibly powerful, compassionate, and loyal, he was lacking in intelligence. But her own experiences told her something else altogether: he was deadly. She could feel the power in that aura of his just waiting to be unleashed. You know, she replied, nodding when he asked her if he could touch her, you're not at all what people say you are. That's so? Uzumaki laughed softly at that before walking to her and holding her arms in different fighting positions to see which of them would best suit her. She noted that he was taking extreme care not to be indecent. He was simply touching her as a master would his disciple than a man would a woman. Yeah. For some reason, the fact that he was so proper made her feel more self-conscious than if he were actually enjoying being that close to her and touching her. Why is my heart beating so quickly? Hanabi thought. I barely met him and he's having such a strange effect on me. Tell me, what chakra natures can you use? She found herself responding automatically without even thinking about the consequences of freely giving away information. The sage's charisma somehow had greatly affected her. My chakra leans towards the wind, but I can also use water. I don't have too many techniques though. I just learned the bare minimum to become a jounin. Until recently, I focused almost exclusively on the gentle fist. The sage nodded before fixing her with an intense gaze. Wind and water, huh? He paused. What a coincidence. She kept staring at him with her white eyes as his blue eyes bore into her. There was so much emotion in that gaze of his, but, despite those emotions being in plain sight for her to read, she could not decipher any of them. He was definitely not what people said he was. He was the perfect example of what a shinobi should be. Powerful. Intelligent. But most of all, deceptive. Chapter 3, Introduction, Plots to Unite the World. Hokage's Office, Konoha, March 1st, AK-22. Kakashi-sensei, am I on your shit list or something? Kakashi found himself sighing in exasperation for what had to be the millionth time since becoming the sixth. He was irritated whenever Naruto was involved because he never found the time to read Ika Ika. The series had gone on even after Lord Jiraiya's death. The editors had been given the mountains of notes that Jiraiya had written and had more than enough notes to continue the stories. It was a good thing, too. Otherwise, Kakashi might have thrown himself off the Hokage monument in despair. Naruto. Language. Naruto merely rolled his eyes at Shizune. Shizune had continued to work as the Hokage's aide after having done the job for so long under Tsunade. Kakashi had been too lazy to find a new assistant and Shizune had wanted to remain as the Hokage's assistant to eventually help Naruto better when he became Hokage. That was the official excuse, at least. Kakashi smiled as he looked at the woman fondly. Neither of them would reveal the true reason. Kakashi turned his attention back to the situation at hand. Naruto was dramatically waving his hands in the air in an exaggerated attempt to be polite. I suppose this would be better then. Kakashi rolled his single visible eye at the sarcastic tone. His student was going to do something childish. Again. Sure enough, Naruto took a quick bow. My liege, your humble servant begs to be killed. It is better for this sinner to perish than to suffer the wrath of my lord. Kakashi sighed yet again while Shizune, the traitor, giggled. Naruto always had been difficult to handle because of his energy and stubbornness, but had been easy to manipulate in the past. Offering techniques or information about his parents went a long way in getting Naruto to behave. Lately, however, it was getting much harder to trick Naruto into falling in line. Perhaps the direct and honest approach was the best. Naruto, I am merely trying to do what is best for you and for the village. Contrary to what you might believe, I am not trying to hurt you. While Konoha's economic and military strength is at an all-time high, that's only in terms of numbers. The quality of our ninja is at its all-time low. During Lord Hashirama's time, we had over 50 A ranks and 7 S ranks. We only have half those numbers with only 25 A ranks and 3 S ranks even when we've been out of war for 6 years. Naruto crossed his arms. I understand. You're telling me that I should teach a bunch of brats because it would help me mature and that Konoha can benefit from having another team like the Sannin, especially after our team fell apart. I am the youngest ninja to reach S-rank status since Itachi and you believe that I can impart that knowledge and drive to these kids. Kakashi almost let out a sigh of relief. Naruto was still loud and obnoxious at times, but he could be insightful and dedicated when he chose to be. Now all he needed to do was stamp the damn document and then find a secret closet where no one could find him so he could read his Aika. Very good. I'm glad you UND. The answer's still no, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi suppressed an urge to bang his head on his table. This day just wouldn't end. Look, I know you think I'm being unreasonable, but try to look at things from my perspective. You had me running almost 40 consecutive S-ranked missions, most of them solo, over the last 2 years. That's more S-ranked missions than what some of our strongest elite jounin do in a lifetime. You still had me going on these missions even after my ex-girlfriend died. I never got to mourn properly. Then on top of that, you always make sure to do your best to time my mission so that I'm always in the village to suffer through that monthly hell called council meetings. And now you're telling me that you want to shove a bunch of brats onto me. Kakashi wanted to break something. Perhaps that was why Lady Tsunade always started and ended the day with some sort of property-damaging move. This job was just too annoying. People complained, people demanded, people never listened and never ever praised. Kakashi would cackle with glee the day Naruto took this damn job away from him. If it makes you feel any better, Lady Tsunade had me going on consecutive S-ranked missions after the Sansound invasion. That was when I was still teaching the 3 of you. So it's not like I've been asking you to do something I wouldn't. You, more than anyone else, understand that sacrifices need to be made. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. The old man used to love saying that. Kakashi noted the glazed look in the blonde's eyes. It was clear that he was reminiscing about the old days. He was probably the most compassionate of all the Hokages, with a heart for the poor. It was true. The third was often unable to make hard choices or often made the wrong choices because he was too compassionate. Naruto's early life was the consequence of one such choice. But at the same time, that compassion for the poor was why Konoha was economically the healthiest of all the nations. Cleaning up the streets and educating and empowering the poor made for a more skilled and less violent population. Naruto, for the last 6+ years, I've had to allocate resources where they were needed the most. That's why I was held off from giving you students. You were needed for other critical missions. Our numbers were ridiculously low after the last war, and despite the era of peace that followed, there were lots of missions to be done. You were the only one who could complete these missions at the insanely fast pace that you set. And that bought us a ton of breathing room. Now, even in the wake of recent attacks on our border, we have the luxury of assigning you students and building up the future generation. I'm trying to give you a break here. Naruto glared at him. A break? Naruto asked incredulously. How is being responsible for 3 lives a break? At least on solo S ranks I don't have to worry about protecting other people. Kakashi groaned. He could just never win with Naruto no matter how he tried to phrase things. Once Naruto decided that something was a certain way, there was no convincing him otherwise. How about a compromise? I'll let you choose your own students. Don't care, Naruto folded his arms. It's like asking me to pick which poison I want to be fed. It's like me asking you which of your Ika books you're willing to let me burn. How about I teach the kids and I burn your Ika books? Kakashi twitched. It almost seemed like his student was being difficult on purpose. That, and the damn boy had the gall to threaten his precious. No one threatened Kami's gift to man and got away with it. Shizen jumped in at this point. Kakashi gave her a quick nod of thanks. He was 1 second away from driving a raikiri through the cheeky brat's chest. It might be best if someone else tried to talk reason into the boy. Kakashi watched as Shizen walked over and gave Naruto a hug. It was always like this with Naruto. He would play bad cop and then she would play good cop. Naruto usually was more agreeable when Shizen delivered the bad news. Naruto, is there anything we can do for you to do this? Shizen, shouldn't you be on my side? The masked bastard has been overworking me and now he wants to control my life. Kakashi-sensei, don't think I don't know what you're doing. You're worried because you think I don't have any more ties to the village. Most of the people close to me are dead or out of the village, so you're trying to use this opportunity to get me to make more bonds so you can be assured of my loyalty. Kakashi winced. Naruto didn't mince any words. It was true. Kakashi was worried that Naruto had no ties to the village anymore. But, at the same time, Kakashi didn't doubt Naruto's loyalty. Kakashi was trying to ease Naruto's loneliness by giving him students. Look, Kakashi said, I was like this as well after all my close friends died. I joined ANBU to isolate myself as much as possible. And remember that I didn't pass any team before yours? Well, it's because I didn't want to pass any teams. I know what you're going through and I'm trying to help. I do not doubt your loyalty at all. Kakashi looked mournfully at his student. I'm sad that you think so little of me. Naruto sighed. Okay. I'll do it. But I want something in return. I only want to take missions that I approve of. No more of these pointless political assassinations or preemptive strikes in the name of protecting Konoha. You're tired of making hard decisions, but Kakashi-sensei, I'm tired of executing your hard decisions out on the field. I'm really tired. Kakashi nodded. It was the least he could do. The casualty rates would skyrocket, but it seemed like Kakashi had pushed Naruto a bit too hard. Any more and they would lose him. That would be disastrous. Not just for Konoha, but for him as well. He had a responsibility to take care of his sensei's only son and his best friend's legacy. Within Naruto lived Obito's true feelings. Kakashi would do anything to ensure those feelings never died. Alright, we have a deal. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for what I made you do over the years. Outskirts of the Land of Ricefields, March 1st, AK-22. Ranmaru activated his eyes and set up illusions in case anyone was following. The illusions were only visual and would fade upon touch, but it would buy him some time. Time he needed to talk to his sensei. You are late, my minion, he heard as he approached the meeting ground. His sensei was dressed in a completely black cloak with a mask that only Ranmaru's eyes could see past. He panted. Not all of us can just pop up anywhere we want like you do, sensei. If you really cared about the time, you could have teleported to me and brought me here with you. It would have taken what, 2 seconds of your time? And damn it, he said angrily, I'm not your minion. His sensei tapped him on the forehead hard. Think of it as your training. Stealth training. Minion. Ranmaru glared at his teacher with his bright red eyes. To anyone else, his red glare might have been terrifying. But to someone like his teacher, it was probably only amusing. I hate you so much, sensei, he spat out. Speaking of which, I heard the name you gave yourself. What of it? Kabuto asked for a name and I provided one, but Taiyu no Kor wa Kokuten? That has to be the most ridiculous name I ever heard. Besides, it sounds like a play on. Ranmaru, I did not come here to hear you crack jokes. I need your report now. You do not have much time to waste either. Alright, Ranmaru grumbled. His teacher was right after all. Ranmaru's illusions were good, but they were still just illusions. Someone would eventually discover that he was missing. Kabuto is getting bolder with the seals you provided him. How so? Is he altering them? No, it's nothing like that, Ranmaru replied. But he's challenging you. He directly defied your orders and placed the seals on warriors marked with the cursed seals of heaven and earth to increase his battle strength. He hasn't made any direct movements against the great villages, but he has intentionally used his spy network to trace missing ninjas and eliminate them for bounties. I believe he's hard-pressed for some money. It's not surprising. After all, he is paying us quite a large sum of money for the dispersion seals. Ranmaru frowned. His sensei didn't seem too worried that Kabuto was straying from the plan. Did his teacher expect this? Or was the money so important that his sensei was willing to compromise? Just what are you doing with all the money you're getting from Kabuto anyway? Foolish apprentice, did you think the weapon that you're carrying on your back was made free of cost? Ranmaru put his hand back to touch his staff. That weapon is the result of over 100 failures. I must remind you, apprentice, that even failures cost money. The amount I have left from my clan funds is impressive, but it is still not infinite. There was a slight pause. It would also appear strange to the banks if I kept burning through money at the rate that I do. Ranmaru lowered his head in shame at that. He hadn't known that his teacher had labored so much to produce the gift. Ranmaru had always had some difficulty molding chakra properly. He would become too fatigued too quickly and many of his techniques would dissipate midway. While he had excellent chakra control, it was almost as if he just didn't have enough chakra to do anything. His initial fighting style had involved using illusions and tricks with his ocular powers while his teacher sought out a viable solution to his problems. The solution had been his 15th birthday gift. The star staff was made of chakra metal and multicolored opal and embedded with a ruby, fire, sapphire, water, emerald, earth, yellow topaz, lightning, and diamond, wind, each special self-sustaining seals that produced its respective chakra. His teacher had been the energy source for 3 while Ranmaru's own chakra somehow was the base for another 2. His teacher said something about how he was able to amplify Ranmaru's chakra to make the fusion work, but most of that went above Ranmaru's head. In any case, with that, the star staff, a staff that only allowed Ranmaru to wield it, had been made. The staff took no chakra to use and acted according to his will. Sorry for my impertinence, sensei, Ranmaru said in an apologetic tone. It was difficult to stay too serious because his teacher wasn't even a decade older than he was and because his teacher didn't mind the jokes most of the time. So Ranmaru had to constantly remind himself that he owed his life to his teacher. Ranmaru had been working at the curry shop for several years when war broke out across the land. Ranmaru didn't have any marketable skills and was on the verge of starving when his sensei had found him almost 5 years ago. Ranmaru didn't show it too often, but he was truly grateful to have a dedicated mentor and direction in life. It's fine, the man replied. After all, you're not the only person I spend my money on. Little Yuna requires quite a lot of attention as well. That's true. Ranmaru laughed at that. Yuna was a little girl that his teacher found a few years ago. His teacher left her in the care of another one of his associates but visited her often. Ranmaru also visited whenever he could and from what he knew, the girl was a handful. In any case, that is irrelevant. Is there anything else? Ah, that reminds me. Were you the one who killed Sakura Haruno? How is that relevant to what Kabuto was doing? Ranmaru could hear a small growl. Ranmaru put up his hands defensively. Don't worry. I'm not trying to waste your time. Kabuto recently heard from his spies in Konoha that she was assassinated. I thought it might be you, but you don't like unnecessary bloodshed. There was a long pause. Essentially yes, although she isn't dead. The seal on her will eventually break and she will wake up. I just needed her out of the way. Konoha either killed her themselves once they found her a waste of space or covered her death up in an attempt to lure me out. Didn't the original plan involve her support? Didn't you want to draw her to our side because of her mastery in medical ninjutsu? I revealed myself to her and presented to her the option of joining us. But she seemed determined to stop my plans, so I had to remove her from the picture. But sensei, then who will take her spot? You know some medical ninjutsu, but you can't take the role of leader, fighter, spy, sealing master, and medic all at once. You're strong, but even you can't completely take over the world by yourself. Ranmaru didn't know the extent of his sensei's plans, but he did know that his teacher wanted to unify the elemental nations. "We can't force someone unwilling to join us," his master said curtly. "We will have to manage without her. I will begin training Yuna in medical ninjutsu instead. Yuna's chakra control rivals Sakura's and is beyond that of anyone else, so Yuna may end up taking that role in the future. In the meantime, keep spying on Kabuto while pretending to be a loyal Oto ninja for about another month. I shall call upon you once again fairly soon." Wait, Ranmaru looked at his teacher curiously. "What about Kabuto? What about him?" Ranmaru looked at his sensei disbelievingly. "Are you just going to let Kabuto get away with disobeying your orders? He's attacking ninjas now. I will look to the side for now as long as he's not attacking civilians. And besides, he's only attacking missing ninjas who deserve to be killed anyway. It will be a good chance for us to see the results of the seals being tested in real combat against real ninjas. Do you have any reports on how effective they are on the field?" Ranmaru frowned. "Given that Kabuto has taken missing ninjas out without a single casualty, I think that those seals of yours are too effective. Aren't you worried that he might betray you?" His sensei chuckled at that. "Oh, he most certainly will. It is the reason those dispersion seals are so inefficient and have a time limit. He has a limited supply. I think he's found a way to create your seals for himself, sensei. It would explain why he has gotten so bold as to defy your orders on multiple fronts. Keep an eye out just in case, but it should be impossible to reverse engineer the dispersion seal without perfectly understanding the branch of Fuinjutsu I personally invented. For its ultimate purpose, it requires a special type of energy not known to most ninjas. I will admit, however, that it is possible for Kabuto to have found a way to extend the life of those seals so that he could use them over and over again. But don't let that bother you. I have a failsafe implanted in the formula in case he's found a way to reuse them." "Mind sharing what that is?" Ranmaru asked, after realizing that his sensei had purposely left that unclear. Why spoil the fun? Ranmaru shivered at the cold, deadly tone. It was one of those rare moments when he realized that his sensei was one of the deadliest fighters in the world. Palace Hall, Jello Continent across the seas north of the Land of Wind, March 1, AK-22. It had been 6 years since Karen Uchiha had decided to forgive and then follow Sasuke. It had been the three of them, three former members of Team Hawk. Sasuke had wanted to find the truth through exploration and reflection. She and Jugo were absolutely loyal to Sasuke if they followed him. Suigetsu, on the other hand, left them and had decided to rejoin Kiri. She thought back to the past. In the end, Orochimaru had never given up his interest in finding the truth of the world through acquiring and experiencing as many techniques as possible and had eventually attacked Sasuke. From Sasuke's account, the mental battle had been even more pathetic than the time when Orochimaru made his first attempt. Sasuke once again absorbed Orochimaru in the power of the White Snake, but this time in less than a minute, and this time permanently annihilating Orochimaru's spirit. That had been 5 years ago. After that, for a year, they traveled throughout the elemental nations, saving villages from bandit attacks and searching for whatever it was that Sasuke was looking for. Sasuke even took up a couple part-time students along the way to impart some of his techniques, although he never let any of them follow. Karen wondered if Sasuke was trying to leave his mark on the world in some way in case he couldn't revive his clan. They now lived in an unnamed land across the seas from the elemental nations. Initially, there had been some opposition to them living in the strange land, but Sasuke personally had crushed any resistance with ease without even killing a single person. It was a show of power and a psychological attack to show that he was far above any of them. Sasuke was sending them a message that he could afford to leave them alive because they were of no concern. It was how Sasuke swiftly became the ruler of the new land. Since then, Sasuke only continued to train daily and become stronger. He trained with such manic obsession that Karen doubted even her distant cousin, Naruto, would be a match for Sasuke. In the elemental countries, the S ranks were heralded as near invincible fighters. There were maybe 20 or so S-ranked ninjas in the elemental nations at any one time. Each could completely change the atmosphere on a battlefield. Karen snorted. In her opinion, none of them met the requirements of a true S rank. A true S rank is one who has S-ranked capabilities, meaning the ability to easily take down elites across multiple disciplines. None of the known S ranks were true S ranks. Without his lightning armor, which gave him speed, defense, and power, the fourth rankage was nothing. The sixth Hokage, from what she had heard, severely lacked the endurance to support his S-rank power. The fifth Hokage had only been feared for her physical strength and medical ninjutsu. The fifth Kazekage was also one-dimensional, using only sand as the basis of his fighting style. Even Naruto, the renowned golden son of Konoha, was nothing without his endurance and immense chakra reserves. Sasuke, however, was a master of ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu, and weaponry all at the same time, even without his Sharingan. He even branched into Fuinjutsu. He was the first true S-rank since Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, with no true weaknesses. "Karen," she heard Sasuke's voice call out. "Yes, Sasuke?" She turned to see her cloaked husband standing a few meters away from her, having just arrived using his spacetime ninjutsu. She was annoyed that he kept using his spacetime ninjutsu to ignore doors and walls, but she wasn't going to tell him not to. In this land, Sasuke was king and he ruled with an iron fist. While he cared little for formality or verbal respect, he did not accept disobedience. "It is time," she gasped. "But, isn't it too soon? So many projects haven't been completed yet. To start now would be reckless." Karen knew that Sasuke was itching to fight against the elemental nations, but this was madness. They didn't have enough firepower to take down the 5 great villages and the dozens of smaller villages. And that wasn't even counting the conventional forces and legions of samurais they would have to fight against. "No, it might already be too late," Sasuke said in a low tone. "I have just come back from the main continent and seen evidence that the countries are amassing power. Konoha especially is amassing power at a faster rate than we predicted. The low casualty rates they had in the last few years are almost unbelievable. Their quick rise may threaten all our plans. To ease your worries, for now, we will move slowly, using our influence from afar rather than using direct confrontation." Karen frowned. What power could threaten the power of the Jello Stone? The stone itself is powered by the spirit of nature itself. It'll take time, but we'll even be able to perfect the Fuinjutsu we created to prevent the usage of chakra within a certain radius. You know as well as I do that chakra is the lifeblood of any ninja. Even the Bijou would be powerless facing this. Numbers meant nothing if they could perfect their seals. Their seals would render any ninja helpless. Sasuke shook his head. "I'm not certain, but I can feel it in my blood. The Uchiha blood is born for battle and I felt it roar in anticipation while on the main continent. I know at least Naruto Uzumaki will not have sat around for over 6 years doing nothing. He will have found a way to fight even if we drain every bit of chakra from his body. I would never underestimate him. You always used to call him a blockhead, so why the fear now?" Karen asked curiously. She knew that Naruto was strong, but Sasuke never seemed to respect him. She suspected that it had something to do with their animosity during their genin days, but she was slightly taken aback by the open praise he was giving to his old teammate. "Karen," she turned to see Jugo, who had just walked into the hall. "This is something only someone who has had a rival would understand. The two of them are incredibly alike, working for the same goal but for different reasons and by using different approaches. Sasuke knows better than anyone that Naruto seeks power." "Power?" Sasuke repeated in a low tone. "Jugo, your own. We both seek justice. He continues to fight to protect the helpless, the poor, and those he loves. I, on the other hand, seek justice for those who have unjustly been killed and forgotten. For us, power is merely a means to an end. If there were a way to achieve what we seek without power, we would have done it. But this world only fears power." Karen nodded. "Yeah. So that's why we've been trying to tap into the power of the Jello Stone for the past year or so." Sasuke inclined his head slightly in agreement. "The power of the Jello Stone's strength lies in the fact that it takes away power from the enemy while leaving me with mine. It is about crushing the opposition with a force they cannot fathom. Why not just get stronger?" Jugo interrupted. "With more power, you'll just crush everyone in your way. Why specifically search out a way to limit other people's power?" Sasuke shook his head. "Eventually, a human will hit his limit. Ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu. I have hit the physical limits in all of the ninja arts. There is only so much chakra a human body can hold and only so much skill, speed, and strength a person can have. One solution is to seek a new type of power. The other is to take away the power of others to raise your relative power. We are doing both by using the Jello Stone. By stripping away chakra, we are removing the lifeblood of the ninjas who will oppose us while we ourselves are using a foreign power unknown to them. I see. That is why you're learning how to fight without chakra, Jugo muttered. And also why you're having us do the same. Another nod. It will take a fantastical amount of power to take on the world. The Jello Stone will be something that none of the great villages expect and will allow us to swiftly run through them. Wouldn't that be the case for Naruto Uzumaki as well? What makes him so special? I'm not sure, but I can feel my blood warning me that Naruto Uzumaki will be a threat to my plans. If he does get in the way, this time, Karen stepped back, startled at the sudden appearance of the red eternal Manjiki Sharingan in her husband's eyes. I will crush him once and for all. For the sake of my justice, for the sake of my family, for the sake of the dead who cry out to me from the other side. Chapter 4, Introduction, New and Old Feelings. Training Grounds, Konoha, March 1st, AK-22. March 1st. September 1st. Those were the 2 days when students in the different ninja academies graduated. They were 2 different tracks. In March, the students projected for heavy combat would graduate from the official academy, while in September, the students projected for support would graduate from the other various support schools and conservatories in the village. The support academy system was a good way to prevent unnecessary casualties among children and rookie ninjas who weren't suited for battle to begin with. Instead, they could be sent to the medical corps, research and development units, or administration departments. They would be given some combat training at home to slowly bring their skills to a low chunin level over a decade and would be used as reserves in emergencies. Many civilian parents understandably elected for their children to take this route. There was the prestige associated with being a ninja without many of the dire costs. On the other hand, the official academy was filled with clan children who had family expectations to live up to and orphans who had no one to hold them back. Jounin would come to see if they wanted to take on any of the new graduates. The ones who did gained a strong teacher. Contrary to popular belief among the clan children, the ones who failed weren't sent back to the academy but were sent to a basic training program along with the ones who failed the regular graduation exam. This basic training program had them become average chunin in about a decade. Occasionally, some of them would even become special jounin, ANBU, and jounin, but for the most part, most ninjas who entered the basic training program ended up as mediocre. Not that that was a bad thing. After all, a large bulk of Konoha's 10,000-strong army was produced this way. Only a rare few were granted the honor of being trained under a jounin and even fewer were granted apprenticeship. Konoha did not have the luxury to have most of its 100 or so jounin babysitting children, even if it was a rite of passage for jounin to be saddled with brats at least once in their careers. It just so happened that it was Naruto's turn this year. Naruto just twitched as he looked at the brats he was supposed to consider as potential students. The 10-year-old kids were fidgeting in excitement at the prospect of being taught by a legend. Naruto sighed. In his opinion, kids engaged in too much hero worship. He personally knew 2 of them from his visits to his old orphanage and felt a sense of kinship with them, but he wasn't too excited about having to be responsible for kids. Alright, we'll be doing introductions even though we all somewhat know one another. I'll begin, he said as the 3 excited 10-year-olds settled down. As you all know, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. He scratched his head. I really don't know what else to say, so you might as well introduce yourselves now. The brown-haired girl wearing pink and yellow and carrying a small cat decided to introduce herself. My name is Hikari Kamaya and this kitty here is Tailmon. Naruto-sensei, I'm not sure if I ever introduced her to you when you visited. Tailmon usually tries to hide whenever someone visits us. I found her on the streets 3 years ago and she's been my friend for a long time now. I'm not from a clan or anything, so I don't have any special skills of note. Oh, and I still have the hair clip you gave me. See, here it is. Naruto looked at the pink clip on her head as the cat meowed as if to introduce itself as well. Naruto smiled. He often visited the orphanage to donate goods and play with some of the younger children. It was sweet that the girl still kept his gift from a few years ago. He pointed to the blonde who was dressed in a yellow and turquoise outfit and wore a hat. The boy was carrying a large rodent with rather large ears on his lap. Next, Takeru Takaishi. I've known Hikari for my entire life because we were family friends. I visit her regularly at the orphanage. I live with my brother right now. This is my pet guinea pig that I received from my parents before they passed away. They said that he's a ninja guinea pig, but I never really see him do anything but eat and poo. His name is Patamon. The guinea pig squealed and flapped its impossibly large ears. Naruto briefly wondered if the rodent could fly with those strange ears. Considering that it was a ninja animal, it probably had some unusual ability. Naruto suddenly had a strange vision showing Patamon temporarily expanding and blowing out a burst of air as it screamed boom bubble. Pa! Naruto shook his head. That couldn't be right. His mind was playing strange tricks on him again. Maybe it was some sort of trend for children to have strange pets these days. The fact that Tailmon and Patamon both had mon at the end of their names was probably a fad as well. Ugh, kids. Naruto groaned. Well, at least the last one didn't have a pet. Naruto smiled as he turned to the last one. Ah, it was Daisuke. This one somewhat reminded his old self. Daisuke, why don't you introduce yourself? Ah, Naruto-sensei, you already know me and they know me from the academy. Naruto gave him an exasperated look. Okay. My name is Daisuke Motomiya. I'm going to become Hokage one day. Naruto snorted. And then I'm going to marry Hikari. Naruto noticed that his other two students were rolling their eyes at the spiky-haired boy. This must have been a common occurrence at the academy. Sensei, what are we going to do today? Hikari asks in a polite tone. Are we going to start missions right away? Don't worry, Hikari. I'll protect you. Naruto smacked his forehead as the idiotic boy leaned over to hug his crush only to be scratched in the face by hissing Tailmon. Ow. That hurts. Naruto got their attention by leaking some of his aura to subtly make them a bit nervous. You won't have a mission today. You still aren't an official genin. What? Takuru asked in shock. Didn't we pass the exam? Naruto shook his head. That was just the test to see if you are worthy of being of the rare few to get a teacher. If you fail this test, you'll either have to go back to the academy to try again next year or go into basic training that most ninjas go through. You still can be ninjas, but you won't have someone watching over you and helping you along the way. I recommend that you try your best for this. Well, I'm going to do extremely well on this test. Daisuke yelled with a fist pump. As well as you did on the regular graduation exam, I'm sure, Naruto said sarcastically. Last place in nearly everything but taijutsu. Good luck impressing little Hikari with those scores. Everyone had a laugh at Daisuke's expense. So then what are we doing for this test? Naruto held up two bells. For this test, you'll have to get a bell by noon, which means you have an hour left. The test begins now. Naruto was impressed that the three of them immediately became serious and jumped away to hide. He had half expected Daisuke to stay and challenge him, but it appeared as if Daisuke was smarter than he himself was when he was a genin. Or maybe he's just not as starved for attention as I once was, Naruto thought darkly. Naruto just sat down and waited for them to come to him. After all, they would come to him to get the bell. After 15 or so minutes, Naruto jumped up quickly when he felt projectiles heading towards his direction. He pushed off the tree with his feet and ducked to avoid the windmill shuriken heading his way. Not bad, Naruto complimented as he saw another windmill shuriken underneath the first one. Deciding to go for overkill, instead of trying to jump in between the shuriken, he molded chakra in both of his hands as quickly as he could. Rasengan! Naruto blew both of the windmill shuriken to bits and swept his hand towards where the shuriken had come from. Instantly a huge gust of wind erupted from his hands and chased out the screaming Daisuke as trees and bushes were uprooted. Hey! Don't you think that's a bit too much, Naruto-sensei? I'm only a kid. Naruto only laughed as he flashed through hand signs and created a rotating whip made of water that he was planning on showing Hanabi that evening. Water release, hydro rotation. He kept chasing the boy with the whip, all the while cackling with glee. Maybe teaching wasn't so bad after all. I think I understand why Kakashi liked doing this so much. Naruto froze when he remembered a particular memory. Kakashi had shoved his fingers in there. Naruto shuddered. Naruto knew he could be particularly vicious with his pranks, but he wasn't going to violate his cute little students in that manner. He was not as cruel as Kakashi. He smirked as he returned to the matter at hand. He just missed Daisuke and slammed his water whip into a tree trunk, blowing it apart. Chasing students with an incredibly dangerous whip was nowhere near as screwed up as what Kakashi did. No one would blame him for being too excessive. Naruto suddenly felt a tingling in the back of his mind. Genjutsu. Instantly he snapped it, and parried the kick from Hikari. "Leave him alone," she yelled. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Maybe the girl did like Daisuke after all. She seemed rather upset that Daisuke was reduced to cowering behind a large boulder. Naruto briefly saw an image of Sakura over Hikari before shaking his head. He shouldn't project his own genin team onto the team he was teaching. Daisuke was not him and Hikari was not Sakura. Already, Daisuke was showing much more skill than Naruto ever did, and Hikari, unlike Sakura, was showing teamwork with and concern for both of her teammates. Naruto grabbed Hikari's ankle as she tried another kick and cast a small genjutsu on her while holding her upside down in the air. Ninja arts, partial darkness. He watched lazily as the girl screamed and writhed. "Hey, stop hurting her." Naruto just held out a lazy hand and grabbed the kunai thrown towards him with only 2 fingers, much to the shock of his hat-wearing student. "Oh? Is it your turn now? Oh ho! I see how it is. You're in love with her." Naruto taunted. Takaru suddenly looked shocked and the hard look in his eyes faded. "Ah, not you, too, sensei. Daisuke always keeps trying to fight me because he thinks Hikari and I like each other." Naruto didn't respond and threw the girl into Takaru's stomach, knocking them both back. Daisuke landed next to them worriedly. "Is Hikari okay?" Naruto watched bemused as the 2 boys tried to shake Hikari awake. His kids were fresh and raw, but they instinctively knew what was important in a fight. They hadn't even tried to fight alone from the very beginning. Daisuke had implicitly agreed to be the distraction for Hikari and Takaru. The fact that there were only 2 bells didn't even register in their minds. Despite the seemingly public displays of dysfunction, the 3 were close and knew one another well. Already, their teamwork was probably better than any other rookie genin team in history. I wonder if that's because all 3 of them are orphans. Orphans want attention and camaraderie more than anything, so what are you going to do? Naruto drawled. "The girl you both are in love with is down and you have less than 5 minutes to get your bells." They both flushed at the mention of love. They looked at each and nodded. Daisuke stepped forward. "I never really got the hang of this, but..." He flashed through some hand signs Naruto was familiar with. "Fire release, fireball." Naruto was shocked that the boy knew an elemental technique already. Sasuke had been the only one of their generation to know an elemental technique. No matter what people said about him, Sasuke was still a genius, the kind that only shows up once every decade or so. Naruto braced himself but then started rolling on the ground in laughter when the fireball ended up being the size of a baseball and slower than a snail. Naruto grabbed his stomach and started kicking the air in laughter as the small fireball zigzagged through the air lazily towards him. "What the hell was that, you idiot?" Takaru demanded. "How am I supposed to set off my traps with that as a distraction?" "Well, he's distracted right now," Daisuke argued. Naruto just kept on laughing as the small fireball passed over him and hit the tree next to him with a small poof. Naruto's danger senses suddenly warned him. "TCH," he muttered before waving his hands and blew all the incoming projectiles away with a large gust of wind. Boom! Naruto looked towards his students. "You could have blown up the bells that way, you know." He was amused when both of his students twitched at his statement. They had probably been expecting an indignant rebuke saying that explosive tags were dangerous. That had been dangerous, well, not really, but Naruto wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of knowing that they had even triggered his 6th sense that warned him of danger. Ding! Well, that's time. Naruto held a hand up and released the genjutsu he placed on Hikari. "Hikari!" Takaru pulled the girl up and gave her a hug. "Are you okay, Takaru?" she asked, clearly dazed. "What happened?" "There was so much darkness. I couldn't see anything." "Hikari! We tried to protect you from that bastard of a teacher. He was the one who hurt you." Naruto rolled his eyes at the drama and stepped towards his students who were all on the ground. "You failed to get a bell. So you all fail. Meow." Naruto turned to see a little white cat leap past him and land in Hikari's arms. "Tailmon," Hikari said as she rushed over and hugged the cat, "You got them. I knew it was the right decision to send you to the marketplace." Naruto looked and in its mouth, there were 3 bells, exactly identical to the ones he had. Naruto's eyes widened. "No way. I can't believe they solved the actual test. We pass, sensei. Hikari said victoriously. All you said was that we needed to get a bell. You never said we had to get it from you. Naruto dumbly nodded, still in shock. The surface test was a test of strength to see if the genin could get a bell. It was impossible and was supposed to alert the genin of a secondary test, a test of teamwork. It was a way to teach the genin that there is always something beneath what is shown to them. Underneath the underneath, however, was yet another test of thinking outside the box. It was true. Naruto never said they had to get a bell from him. But the test was designed to keep people focused only on what was directly in front of them. He himself was an example of this. People only saw his brash side pulling pranks and declaring that he would become Hokage. His closer friends saw his determination and loyalty under that. No one, however, saw his resentment towards the village and fatigue from serving a village that never truly accepted him. Everyone refused to see his insight, his intelligence, and his pain. His students had done in 1 hour what the rest of the village could not in 22 years. Naruto smiled. Despite his reluctance to teach, he was happy and proud of his students. They would eventually become amazing ninjas. Good job. You pass with flying colors. All 3 of you. Wait. Daisuke began. All that work? Takeru continued. All the fighting we did was for nothing? Daisuke said disbelievingly. Are you freaking kidding me? Well, I wanted to teach you multiple lessons here. First, you had to know that you couldn't get a bell from a jounin. That should have brought you together. If you can't overcome an obstacle, work together. The essence behind this test was not strength but teamwork. All of you pass on that mark. Hikari came to defend you, Daisuke, and will both you and Takeru work together? All 3 of you worked together initially to set up that trap as well. Then even if Hikari didn't have Tailmon bring the bells, you would have passed us? Takeru asked. Yes, he said simply. I was going to see what you would do after I gave you, but not Hikari, the bells. But it's annoyingly clear that both of you would have fought to give up your bell for little Hikari there. She's lucky to have 2 boys in love with her. Naruto smirked and pointed at the now blushing girl. But then, what was the point of Hikari getting the bells? Takeru asked. There's always a different way out. Remember that. As ninjas, we're taught to look beneath what is shown to us, but I want to teach you to look even deeper than that. When you're looking at situations or people, always make sure to keep searching deeper and deeper. Does that mean that we're supposed to assume that Daisuke isn't a lovesick idiot? Takeru asked with a smirk. Hey! Take that back, Takeru. Daisuke shouted as he grabbed Takeru's collar. Naruto looked at them curiously. Takeru hadn't seemed like the type to start fights, but perhaps Naruto had read him wrong. Takeru seemed just as willing as Daisuke to stir up trouble. Naruto couldn't help but show a little smile. Yes, his students weren't a reincarnation of the old Team 7. Naruto just had to get over the ghosts of his past. Nah, Hikari piped up. That would make sense if he started to have a crush on me when we became ninjas, but he's liked me for years. He's a legitimate idiot. Ah, Hikari. Daisuke whined. That was mean. Sorry, Daisuke, but you couldn't save me even after promising to protect me. The girl crossed her arms and turned her head to the side. I would have given you a big reward if you did, too. She made a kissing motion with her face. She instead went over to Takeru and gave him a hug, which Takeru gladly returned. They all laughed as Daisuke rolled on the ground in emotional agony and moaned about lost chances. Hyuga Clan Compound, Konoha, March 1st, AK-22. Hinata stood at the end of the small pond owned by her family and looked at the reflection in the moon. She had been stressed for the last year or so and had found her new habit relaxing. It started when Naruto eagerly accepted when Sakura asked him to be her boyfriend almost 2 years ago. That hurt. Hinata had all but poured out her heart for Naruto before and during the last war, and still it wasn't enough to win the heart of the boy she adored. After the war, Naruto had politely refused, saying that while he cared for her, he simply did not know her well enough to return her love. Still, Hinata had hoped. She had hoped with time on her side that Naruto would eventually get to know her and return her love. A meal here and a talk there. She did all she could to make herself visible to him. It still hadn't been enough. Sakura regularly abused him, and yet Naruto instantly agreed to commit himself to her. But Hinata, more so than anyone else, knew that Naruto truly loved the other girl, Naruto getting the girl he always dreamed about and chased after. Naruto finally breaks through to Sakura after his years of persistence and refusal to give up. The story, their relationship had felt so right. Sakura was bright, confident, and strong. Sakura was the very antithesis of who Hinata was. Thus, Hinata didn't begrudge Sakura for her relationship with Naruto. However, when she heard Sakura had died, Hinata had started to hope again. She felt guilty for being happy that one of her friends had passed away, but that guilt felt small in comparison to her desire to be with the one person she adored for her entire life. But there was still no progress on that end. Naruto was constantly on missions and somehow slipped away whenever she tried grabbing a hold of him. If she didn't know any better, she would say that he was purposely avoiding her. Then before Hinata knew it, it became March. She had been so engrossed with trying to get Naruto's attention that she had forgotten that Hanabi was turning 18 that month. Because the elders had deemed her weak and unfit for the position of clan head, Hinata was not the crown princess of the Hyuga clan when she reached adulthood more than 4 years ago. Now that Hanabi was turning 18, there would be a challenge match. The stronger of the two girls would be named the official heiress and the other would have the caged bird seal placed on her. It was a lose-lose for Hinata. If she won, then Hanabi would be sealed. She didn't want her little sister to be sealed. But if Hinata lost, then she herself would be sealed. Hinata wasn't too close to Hanabi, but they were still sisters. How could the elders be so cruel so as to put two sisters in what might as well be a battle to the death? She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't even sense the person who came behind her. Big sister? Hinata turned around. Hanabi? What are you doing out here? Her sister hesitated and looked uncomfortable. Hinata smiled. Ah. So that's what it was. Hanabi was sweet on a boy and had been looking to sneak out. I just needed some fresh air, Hanabi finally decided. Hinata's gentle smile remained. It appeared that Hanabi wasn't going to admit it. Hinata nodded before turning to look at the water and started throwing the petals off the flower she was holding into the water. There was a legend that if the petals floated towards the girl who tossed them into the water, the one she loved would come seeking for her. The petals didn't particularly float one way or another on most days, but that didn't stop Hinata from trying and hoping the petals would float towards her. I usually come here whenever I feel that way, Hinata responded. It was true. Whenever she did get stressed about Naruto, she did end up in front of the pond. I see, Hanabi murmured. Hinata knew that Hanabi understood the hidden meaning. Thinking about him again? Hinata gave no response for a minute but merely continued to lightly toss the petals into the pond. Not just about him, but yes, I was thinking about Naruto. Hanabi came to stand next to her. Can you tell me about him? Hinata instantly grew suspicious. Hanabi never talked about boys when she was growing up. Even when boys had shown interest in Hanabi, the girl had not mentioned it at all. This was the first time she showed any sort of interest in a male. Hinata didn't have proof that Hanabi was interested in Naruto, however. It could still just be an innocent question. She mentally sighed. She really needed to stop letting her feelings for Naruto get in the way of everything else in her life. Kurenai-sensei kept warning Hinata not to be too obsessed, but it was just so difficult not to be fixated on the only person and thing that gave her life meaning. Naruto is the most compassionate and determined person in the world. He never backs down and continues to get back up whenever he's thrown down, always fighting for what he believes in and for those who are in need. A true hero. I see. Silence. Then, why do you ask? Hinata asked. Even Hinata had to wince at the accusatory tone in her own voice. Calm down, girl. It's Hanabi. She's refined and cultured. There is no way she would go after Naruto anyway. Don't worry, big sister. I'm not in love with him or anything. There was a slight pause. Even if I were in love with him, do you think he loves me? I can count the number of times I talked to him on one hand. I'm just curious because you love him so much. Everyone says he's unintelligent, perverted, and rude. Hinata nodded, finding herself strangely happy that Hanabi insulted Naruto. Hinata figured that it was because it meant Hanabi wasn't interested in Naruto, but Hinata felt a bit ashamed at being happy that someone had put Naruto down nonetheless. Hanabi, someday you'll discover that intelligence or the appearance of respect aren't the most valuable things in this life. Naruto may be unintelligent, but he knows his purpose. Naruto may not be respectful to those with positions of power, but I have never once seen him abuse or mistreat anyone. Our own clan has never given a single ryo to an orphan and often scoffs at commoners. Naruto regularly donates at least half his wages to the needy and speaks with them in a respectful manner. The poor, I dare say, would say that Naruto is more respectful than the Hyuga clan. Our village is blessed to have someone so strong and kind like him. He sounds like a wonderful person, big sister. Hanabi paused before going on. I think I can understand why you like him so much. Hinata narrowed her eyes at that comment, but chose merely to nod her head. It wasn't healthy to be so paranoid that she would suspect her own sister of trying to steal the man she loves. Whenever Naruto speaks to me, I get a warm glow in my heart that makes my life so much brighter. Love is an amazing feeling, Hanabi, and I hope you'll get to experience it someday. There was just silence as Hinata watched the petals float away from her. Training Ground 7, Konoha, March 1st, AK-22. You're late, Hanabi heard as she arrived. My apologies, Lord Uzumaki, Hanabi said with her head low. I was. She tried to find the right words, held up. I understand. The sage didn't seem to mind too much as he nodded in acceptance. Life gets in the way sometimes. What's important is how you play the cards that life deals to you. So shall we begin? Hanabi nodded eagerly. The previous night's training session had helped her tremendously. By some stroke of luck, Hanabi had the exact chakra alignment as the sage. He too used wind primarily and had water as a secondary nature, so he was able to help her far more than anyone else had in the past. And that was all in just one night. Unfortunately, as mentioned before, I'm not able to practice at home. But I did review the concepts in my head in practice without the use of elemental chakra, Hanabi replied. And I did go through the basic motions to incorporate this new technique in my fighting style. Great, let's see it now. The style that they designed for her the previous night resolved the range issue. According to Uzumaki, the problem with ranged attacks was the high chakra cost. Because the opponent has the ability to see the attack coming, most ranged attacks would not hit and thus make them a waste of energy. The Hyuga's 8 trigrams vacuum palm required too much chakra and had nowhere near the speed that was required to make it a viable option for a battle involving purely ranged attacks. Hanabi had felt lost at that point. It seemed that what Uzumaki was trying to do was make her both a close-range and long-range specialist at the same time. Was that even possible? Would she be able to switch back and forth between two styles? It was then that the sage smirked and told her to forget about trying to incorporate ranged attacks. She still was stunned by the sheer brilliance of his idea. The gentle fist was simply not a style suited for distance fighting, so the sage said that there was no point in trying to use it as such. Instead, supplementary ninjutsu would be used to bring the battle to a point where her gentle fist would work. Instead of chasing her enemies with attacks, she would bring her enemies near to her. This involved using water nature manipulation to create a tiny but durable whip that would cut through the air to grab her enemies and bring them into the range of her attacks. The water whip itself could be used as a ranged weapon as well in an emergency, even though it wasn't quite the deadly kind of weapon she would need in such a fight. Unless she specifically scheduled a training session in the training grounds, which she couldn't do too often given the thousands of ninjas wanting to use them during the day, she had to train on the clan grounds. And that would reveal that she was trying to use other styles than the gentle fist. So during the day she had practiced the motions using invisible chakra strings. Anyone using a Byakugan would have seen her whipping around a chakra thread, but at least there would be no visible damage to the grounds, and most Hyuga did not use the Byakugan in the clan compound unless training, and those who saw would just assume that she was practicing chakra control. Now all she needed to do was to go through those same motions using water. Water release, water whip, she intoned softly after going through the motions. She felt her chakra be converted to water and then take the shape of a long rope. She faced down Uzumaki and prepared to use the whip to grab him as he instructed her to. She swung her whip and commanded it to rush towards the sage, only to have it completely broken apart by another water whip, if it could be called that. It looked more like a tiny rapidly rotating vortex of water in the general shape of a long rope. Water release, hydro rotation, the sage remarked as she lost complete control over her own whip. That was a good first attempt, but you focus too much on creating the form of the whip itself. How it appears doesn't matter. If your whip gets destroyed, then you're just wasting chakra as you try to make it again. You need to create something that won't even get destroyed by a rock. Watch. Hanabi watched with her Byakugan as the sage swung the water rope at a nearby rock and smashed it to pieces. She noted that there were 5 different sets of streams of water that were spiraling throughout the rope at independent but all incredibly rapid rates. I see, Hanabi murmured. The velocity of the water was what gave its tangibility, not the water itself. I was too narrow-minded, Uzumaki nodded. As are many people. He changed the whip to be a stable rope simply filled with water and repeated the motion at a tree. The whip splashed in a small burst of water and disappeared upon impact. Chakra itself isn't your weapon, Hanabi. It's how you use chakra that counts. Now try it again. You don't have to use rotation to the extent that I did, but it's what will keep the rope from being destroyed the moment it touches something. Hanabi pondered for a minute or so, trying to figure out the ideal set of hand signs. I needed to grab and to hit, but I can't expend too much chakra on it to keep it constantly rotating at a high frequency. She added a few seals, so maybe only 1 set of rotation instead of 5. She created another whip that looked somewhat like a cross between her first water whip and Uzumaki's whip and threw it towards the sage who merely swatted at it. Instead of bursting the instant it hit, the whip wrapped his hand, before expanding and trapping his entire hand in an orb of water. The sage looked at his water-covered hand. Instead of using a tremendous amount of chakra to constantly keep the water rotating in multiple streams, you make it rotate in only one direction and compensate for the relative weakness by responding to changes in the water in real time. You're actually controlling every drop of water in your whip. So it doesn't matter if it bursts momentarily since it's all attached with your chakra, you can just reshape it immediately to trap the entire area. I'm impressed. You took advantage of the fact that you have amazing chakra control. What are you going to call it? Water release, burst whip. He nodded. Okay, now practice it with your gentle fist and I'll give you tips on how you could improve. I used to be a pure close-range fighter as well and know some of the difficulties of trying to expand into mid-range and long-range. For the next half hour or so, she practiced grabbing different objects and bringing them closer to her as she rushed towards them for a gentle fist strike. She was rather satisfied with the results. She maintained the elegance of the gentle fist style by appearing like a ribbon dancer while increasing her reach to at least 20 meters away from her, a vast improvement of her original range of 4 or 5. All right, Uzumaki said. Test it out on me. I'll let you catch me if I feel your attempts were sufficient enough. She nodded. All right. Water release, burst whip. She yelled in her mind as she converted her chakra into water and then saturated the newly formed water with her chakra. She noted glumly that Uzumaki was far too quick to be caught by her whip. She instantly created another one and started trying to fence him in. All I need is just one touch. If I can make contact with him. She felt the tug on her chakra signaling that she managed to hit him and then forced the water to expand and ensnare. Instantly, before he could apply his chakra to attach himself to a surface, she quickly tugged to launch him in the air toward her direction. She quickly released her water technique and raced towards him at top speed to strike him with her gentle fist. She jumped with her palm back and was glowing with chakra. 3 more seconds until she would hit him. 2, 1, water release, wild water wave. She sputtered as a burst of water hit her and drenched her before finding herself sprawled on the ground in the sage's arms. Hey, she yelled indignantly, shoving her Hyuga stoicism to the side. What was that for? Uzumaki laughed at her as he looked up at her. He had somehow teleported himself to cushion her fall. I never said I would not attack. You can't just expect your enemy to let you hit them. Oh, want to hear a joke? He chortled. I put out the fire on the firecracker. Ha ha, she was not pleased. The joke was incredibly lame and she was not happy being wet. She sat up and raised her chakra-coated palm to strike him when she noted the rather compromising position that they were in. Also, with her clothes soaking wet, she was probably giving the sage a good idea of what she was hiding under her robes. The sage apparently had just noticed the same thing and had turned away while she blushed. He quickly but gently set her off of him and used a wind technique to dry the both of them off. Unfortunately, that had actually made the problem worse. Apparently, Uzumaki's jutsu for drying them off had a very short reach and they both had to endure being close together for about 5 minutes as they dried off. Anyone who might have seen them at that moment would have assumed that they were lovers embracing each other. There was an awkward silence. A very long, awkward silence. He said, not meeting her gaze, I think it's best if we don't meet for some time. Still blushing, she nodded. Yes, Lord Uzumaki. I feel that would be for the best. Chapter 5, Introduction, Conspiracies. Forests near Training Ground 22, Konoha, March 4, AK-22. Naruto hopped from tree to tree, not with his feet, but with his spacetime ninjutsu, if it could be called that. In actuality, it was an application of a special power that Naruto was recently working with. Naruto had hit the limits of chakra training. He found that his chakra levels stopped growing after a while and that he could not force any more power into his ninjutsu attacks. Initially, that had been fine, he simply decided to work on taijutsu. Eventually, he had hit a limit there. He then focused on genjutsu, weaponry, and even fuinjutsu. Again, each time, he hit a limit. Naruto supposed that most humans wouldn't hit those limits. But Naruto had the benefit of training 500 times faster than anyone else. 1 year would be 500 years. 2 would be 1,000 years. He had broken the limits of what was practically possible for humans and had hit the theoretical limits of human ability. As a result, he had even decided to pick up on medical ninjutsu and dabbled in trying to master different styles of fighting to increase his versatility, rather than power, but at that point, it was diminishing returns. If he wanted to become stronger, he would need to seek out a new power. And he did. Eventually, he found what he was looking for. Instead of using chakra, he would use spiritual, yin, energy and physical, yang, energy, the two components of chakra. Unlike chakra, which had a form, neither spiritual energy nor physical energy had a form. Thus, there would be no limit to what the body could hold. The only constraints would be what his mind was able to come up with. This teleportation technique was based on that theory. Naruto would rip a hole in spacetime first with the imaginary powers of spiritual energy and then keep the hole open with the life-giving properties of physical energy. It had been extremely difficult to learn how to use spiritual and physical energies independently, but the rewards had been worth it. Naruto could feel himself growing stronger once again. He called it the shadow step. The only problem was that he had to have a yin-yang seal that opened up a hole in spacetime at his destination. He had recently covered many different spots in Konoha with seals that forcibly separated chakra into spiritual energy and physical energy, but the seals took incredibly long to create. Seals generally operated with chakra, so he would have to spend hours to create one of the complex seals. He preferred manually opening a hole in the distance, but that required visualization of the area he was teleporting to, so he was practicing his technique while his own students were training with his shadow clone. He would be damned if he let his training slow down because he had students. A good teacher had to set a good example for his or her students anyway. Suddenly, he was filled with memories of his students. That was his cue to go. He quickly leaped towards where his students were training, taking care not to reveal that he knew a teleportation technique. Well, it looks like all 3 of you are gaining the hang of it after a couple days, Naruto remarked as he arrived. All 3 of his students were hanging upside down from different tree branches. Naruto-sensei. Look at me. I can hop from tree to tree like Tailmon now. Hikari jumped from trunk to trunk of different trees. Takuru was doing the same thing except he was chasing Patamon, who was definitely flying with those strange ears of his. Ha! Daisuke shouted. The boy was standing upside down, clearly proud that he had succeeded at the task. I'm awesome! Naruto rolled his eyes at their excitement. Kids these days got too excited over the smallest things. Maybe, but you do know what the next step of the training is, right? Daisuke gulped at his tone and Naruto smiled evilly. Nope. Naruto formed 3 other shadow clones. All 3 of them sported the same evil grin as they each went through hand signs. You have to be able to stay sideways or upside down while my clones fire at you. Water release, wild water wave, they each shouted out. Naruto's clones made sure to reduce the power to prevent them from getting hurt, but all 3 of them were now drenched and on the ground. Hey! No fair! Hikari shouted. You didn't say start. Naruto smiled at the sweet girl. The girl was sweet, happy, and bright, but was way too innocent. Hikari, do you think your enemy is going to say start before they kill you? The girl froze and then shook her head seriously. No, sensei. I'm sorry that I complained. Naruto nodded. I'm glad you understand. You three have to be able to do this exercise without even thinking about it. Just be glad that I'm not throwing kunai and shuriken at you. There's a teacher named Anko who used to do that with her students. The three of them shivered at that. Okay, Naruto-sensei. We'll try our best. Takaru said. Naruto took out a huge pile of snacks from a storage scroll. Here, I bought some goodies for anyone who can dodge for at least 10 minutes without falling to the ground. I don't even care if you get hit. Just make sure to stay above the ground. But, he motioned to Patamon and Tailmon, they get to eat while you do this exercise, so if you take too long, you won't get any snacks. The guinea pig and the cat started eagerly going through the gigantic pile of snacks. Over the last few days, Naruto had learned that the two were bottomless pits whenever they saw something they liked to eat. And sweets were definitely on that list. Ah, no fair. Hikari whined but nodded as she walked up a tree. Tailmon, she looked towards the small cat, please save some for me. Naruto raised an eyebrow as the cat smiled at the girl and nodded. He initially figured that Tailmon understood Hikari from being with her for so long, but it appeared as if the cat was a bit more than just a simple cat. Naruto wondered if Tailmon would become to Hikari what Akamaru was to Kiba. It would certainly help Hikari's fighting abilities if she had a ninja cat watching her back all the time. Patamon was the same way as well and fully understood whatever each of them said. Just watch. I'll get this done in the first 10 minutes. Daisuke shouted confidently. Try your best, Naruto-sensei. Naruto turned to look at the confident boy as he filed his thoughts about Tailmon and Patamon in the back of his mind. Naruto smirked and nodded at his clones. Oh, don't worry, Daisuke, I will. Naruto started laughing as Daisuke immediately got knocked off his tree. Forests near Training Ground 25, Konoha, March 4, AK-22. It was her week off and Hanabi was currently training with Konohamaru, a fellow A-rank ninja. He was also the heir of a noble clan and was the honorable grandson of the third. He was a capable sparring partner. It was often too hard to gain the necessary experience to move up higher in level the higher she got. There were fewer people she could train with and even fewer she could learn from. That was why her night with Uzumaki had been so helpful to her, but she still needed a regular training partner around her level. After being placed in a squad together for a mission 3 years ago, she and the older teen had often trained together. They were about even. She was much more skilled than he was at close range and he was more versatile with options at close, middle, and long ranges. She had the benefit of the Byakugan while he had greater speed, strength, and endurance. Damn it, I hate it when I can't use my best technique on an opponent, Konohamaru said in a frustrated tone. Can't you just stay still for once, and get hit with the Rasengan? She inquired in a somewhat amused tone. Why would I do that? Hanabi sidestepped another shadow clone that had tried to thrust yet another Rasengan at her and using her momentum from the turn, swung her arm out in a gentle fist strike. Poof. Ugh. I know, he said, it's just frustrating. I'm best at close range but you're so much better. She smirked. Well, I am a Hyuga, after all. Our entire fighting style is built for defense against all ranges and extreme offense at close range. She then added, try fighting exclusively from mid-range or further out. It'll help you expand your developing mid-range skills and I get to practice defending against them. Konohamaru nodded before jumping back. Fire release, Great Flame, Kaiten. Hanabi used her rotation to blow away the fireball. Water release, Burst Whip. She struck at where Konohamaru was hiding. She could see him with her Byakugan, but he quickly dodged. Wow. I didn't know you knew a new technique. Don't tell anyone. I don't want my family to find out. There was a risk that her family would find out, but she needed to practice it on an opponent and after what happened with Uzumaki, she no longer had a training partner. If she got caught, she would just pass off the technique as something she kept using to keep up her nature manipulation skills, which was a requirement for all jounin. She flung the whip again and came close to ensnaring the boy. Damn it, Hanabi. That thing looks painful. Big brother Naruto would probably be cracking a joke about how I'm completely whipped by a girl. She nearly tripped at that and groaned as a mental image of Uzumaki sporting a wide grin popped into her mind. Even when she wasn't seeing him, he found a way to drive her insane. For the last few days she barely could keep the sage out of her mind. Her mind would simply replay the scene where he was holding her close to dry her off, and then, there was the incident where he easily swatted away her blow. She had gotten a glimpse of his incredible power then, and it was difficult to forget. Hanabi shook her head as she saw Konohamaru duck and swerve a few times before going even further back. He was now out of her extended range. There was only one thing to do then. 8 trigrams vacuum palm. Hanabi had to wince after she saw her technique fly towards the boy. It was fast, but given the distance, Konohamaru might as well have an infinite amount of time to prepare. The gentle fist was incredibly limited in the range, and the few long-range techniques only wasted chakra. Uzumaki was right. Konohamaru didn't appear to be satisfied with standing outside of her range, however. He drew a chakra blade and immediately formed a fire blade that coated the metal blade. Hanabi reactivated her water whip as she dodged the fireballs that he launched by swinging his blade as he rushed into her range. Not having any success ensnaring the older teen with only one water whip, she created another one and immediately grabbed his blade, expanded the water to cover his entire arm and pulled as she raced forward. Konohamaru managed to free himself with a large burst of earth chakra from his trapped arm, absorbing the water, but Hanabi was already in range. 8 trigrams 64 palms. She panted after her technique was done, only to see Konohamaru disappear in a puff of smoke. She jumped up, knowing that Konohamaru had to be underground, but found her legs suddenly trapped by mud and dirt that had risen from the ground and hardened. Konohamaru placed his fire blade on her neck. And that's checkmate. Good match, Hanabi sighed. They were about even in skill, and her intelligence covered her relative lack of power, but she lost to him more often than not to the older boy because of his greater experience. Still, it was always somewhat of a disappointment whenever she lost. Yeah. But what was that ribbon thing? Konohamaru asked. Well, you know as well as I do that I can't fight at a distance very well. Hanabi did not let her mind go to Uzumaki again lest she blush brightly at the memory. Learned of a way where I could extend my reach and grab my opponents to bring the battle into my range. That way, I can set the tone instead of trying to match theirs. Yeah, I bet, he said. The way you wave that thing makes it incredibly unpredictable. And since it looks like you're attacking with it, opponents are less likely to think that you're just using it to grab them and pull them in. It's still a work in progress. Ideally, it would be nice if I could channel my gentle fist attacks through the water, but I want to concentrate on grabbing first. Well, if that's a work in progress, I don't want to see the final product. That technique will end up being deadly, Konohamaru laughed before looking at his watch. Well, it looks like I'm almost late for my lunch date, so I'll be heading back now. Hanabi nodded as the boy disappeared in a body flicker. She started to practice by herself again with her water whip when she heard a huge swoosh. Swoosh. Boom! Hanabi turned on her Byakugan and saw a huge vortex of water off in the distance. She wondered if it was several ANBU squads participating in war games. That would be worth watching. She didn't have anything else to do, so she headed off towards the vortex of water. Forests near Training Ground 25, Konoha, March 4th, AK-22. What were you saying again, Daisuke? Naruto blared at one of his students. Something about me being old and not being able to keep up with you young ones? Naruto realized that he probably didn't look like a responsible Jonin sensei with all the fallen tree trunks everywhere. But he didn't care. He would teach his way. Lord Uzumaki. Naruto turned and saw Hanabi. He wasn't embarrassed, but what had happened several nights ago made the situation between them awkward. He could tell that the girl was hesitant to approach him. Naruto mentally sighed. There was just no way of getting around this. He'd have to do it the usual way. Head on. Yo! What's up, little firecracker? The girl's face flushed. Naruto had to smile at that. The girl was proper and had a good handle on her emotions, but she wasn't nearly the stoic prick that her father was. The girl actually had a heart. The girl finally decided to sigh and ignore his comment and the awkwardness. It seems like we're always running into each other in the training grounds after you throw around incredibly destructive ninjutsu. Oh, that? That was just my water release, hydro vortex at 1/10 of the original power, Naruto said casually. 1/10, the girl blanched. Naruto whistled innocently at that. Truthfully, it had been even weaker than that, but he wasn't going to tell that to anyone. It was best if people kept underestimating him, even if they did acknowledge him as a strong fighter. It was why he kept letting people think that he was still an idiot. Naruto had to mentally scoff at that. Did people really think that anyone who could spam shadow clones and gain knowledge 500 times faster than anyone else could be an idiot? Arrogant fools. Naruto shook his head. It wasn't the time to get angry at the villagers. Well, something like that, Naruto said with a grin. My kids thought they were getting a little too smug about their success and avoiding my shadow clones squirting them with extremely slow streams of water. Naruto-sensei, Sakura groaned. That was not just squirting us. Those water attacks were strong enough to break large tree branches off of the trees. And they weren't extremely slow either, sensei, Daisuke said. Naruto almost laughed when he saw that there were swirls in the boy's eyes. Those jets of water were faster than kunai thrown at full strength. And then you fire off that monstrous water tornado or something. We could have been killed, sensei, Hikari said. Tailmon merely meowed sadly next to the wet girl. Takuro, Hikari, that's why you have to learn to control what Daisuke says. When your teammate runs his mouth off, he might make an enemy upset and do what I just did. Generally, enemies hold back against you for a while as they try to gauge your strength. Unfortunately, if you anger them too much, they'll put everything they have in the next few attacks. It's a real-life lesson for you all. The kids looked somber at that. Daisuke especially looked ashamed. Naruto figured the boy was probably feeling guilty for putting his pretty Hikari in danger. It looks like you're just making an excuse to drench your kids in water, Hanabi observed. Despite being annoyed at the girl for ruining his perfect excuse, Naruto was pleased that Hanabi had gotten over the awkwardness and stood next to him. Naruto nodded happily. Of course. The kids groaned at that. I take every opportunity to torture my cute little students. You're a meanie, Naruto-sensei, Hikari said while hugging Tailmon. A really big, fat meanie. I may be meanie, but you little brats are annoying, he returned in an even happier tone. It was much too fun to mess with children, even one as cute as Hikari. So I consider us even. Naruto turned to Hanabi again. So what are you doing here? I was training when I saw your hydro vortex from a few training grounds away, Hanabi explained. It was so powerful, the kids groaned again, that I thought it was part of some kind of war games that ANBU might have been carrying out. I was curious so I dropped by. Even the pretty lady says that it was powerful, sensei. Daisuke shouted while waving a fist in the air. You're being too harsh on us. We're still just kids. Naruto rolled his eyes. Whatever, Naruto then smirked, but Daisuke, if you want to impress Hikari, you need to be a man. His smirk grew wider. That means, you got to stop being such a little kid and you need to start facing my attacks head on without complaining. Naruto started chuckling when that shut the annoying little brat up. Daisuke had a good heart and even a good head on his shoulders, but he was way too focused on Hikari. For now that was okay and Naruto would allow it, but that habit needed to be broken fast. Such feelings became distractions on real missions. But what about us? Takuro moaned as Patamon flew around him. I want to be a kid for a little while longer. Takuro gave Naruto a pleading look. Sensei, just be harsh on Daisuke. Naruto laughed before he pulled out another storage scroll and tossed it on the ground where it revealed a picnic towel with food on it. Anyway, all three of you, eat. There aren't any snacks in this one, but I figured that you might be hungry after the training today. You'll have to deal with a sandwich or two for now, but I'll take you guys out to eat later. Consider it an apology for putting you through a mini hurricane. He ignored the cheers and walked a few paces away with Hanabi for some space and privacy. Training, he looked at Hanabi with a thoughtful expression. He wondered if she was practicing her newest addition to her style. She nodded. I tried to use my burst whip in battle against a training partner. Naruto was surprised that she used it out in the open, but nodded. He figured that she needed a real training partner to use it on. He briefly wondered who her training partner was. From what he knew about the girl, her genin teammates had died on missions in the past and she didn't have too many close friends. And, I still have issues with range, but I don't think that's ever going to change while I'm using the gentle fist style. Naruto nodded again. Ultimately, even long-range fighters have an extent to their range. Otherwise, long-range bombers could hit us here all the way from IWA or Kumo. You just need to have a decent area where your techniques are effective. But I don't think that was your problem. Let me guess. You stood in one spot and tried to chase your partner with only your whip. Naruto noticed the girl was slightly surprised at that. Now that I think about it, I did. You're still used to fighting in the pure gentle fist style even if you've been making modifications to it over the last few years. I told you. The gentle fist is about making the least amount of movements to take out the enemy, so it's no surprise that you stood in one spot while following your enemy with your weapon. But you have to remember that even if they might not be physically fast as most close combat fighters, most long-range fighters are extremely agile and are highly adept at dodging. You'll have to chase them down, not just stay in one place hoping that they'll get hit. The girl looked thoughtful at that. Thank you, Lord Uzumaki. Naruto felt uncomfortable at the long silence that followed that. None of it really made any sense. It wasn't as if he liked her or she liked him. So why did the situation feel so strange? Hey, Naruto-sensei. Introduce us to your girlfriend. Daisuke called out. She's really pretty. Naruto smirked at the outraged look on Hikari's face. No, not as pretty as you, Hikari. Naruto laughed at that, but Hanabi looked ready to kill someone. Naruto looked at her with a smile, inviting her to beat the kid down with a gesture. I won't tell anyone if you won't tell. Secret meeting place, Kumo, March 5, AK-22. Sakuma Hyuga found himself in a small poorly lit room, talking to a large one-armed man. The room was much too cramped for a noble such as he, but he would suffer this humiliation for a while. Sacrifices did have to be made. After all, you had to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Officially, he was in Kumo for a diplomatic mission, but his true purpose was to find support for his plan. His plan to take over the Hyuga clan. We have no reason to trust your word. For all we know, this could be a trap designed by Konoha. In terms of numbers, Konoha is currently the strongest of great villages. How do we know that this is not some ploy to start a war? Lord Hokage, I assure you that Konoha has nothing to do with this. As for a war, you yourself are rather famous for calling us peace-loving tree-huggers. Why would that change all of a sudden? Copy Ninja Kakashi is nowhere near the pacifist that Sarutobi and Senju were, and he is 10 times the strategist they were. I would not put it past him to fabricate a scenario where he had to go to war. After all, his father was disgraced because of a mission gone wrong against Kumo. Sakuma was getting annoyed at the inane arguments. Lord Hokage, Sakuma tried to keep the sarcastic tone out of his voice. I am sending you documents detailing the layout of my clan's entire compound. If this were a trap, it would be an incredibly stupid one, as we are handing you sensitive information about Konoha's strongest clan. Sakuma paused before deciding to throw a veiled insult. Surely, you have your own intelligence on Konoha and can confirm the truth of my words. The Hokage didn't seem convinced. Then, what of the Hyuga clan? Why should we listen to the words of a main house Hyuga who feared the secrets of their Byakugan being discovered? There is no guarantee your documents represent reality. Sakuma patiently listened to the barbarian ramble in an attempt to be intelligent. It was all a farce. Both of them knew that he spoke the truth and that the Hokage would accept his proposal. You know as well as I do that I seek to become the ruler of the Hyuga clan by becoming either the clan head or the Grand Elder. That should be proof enough. You will never get anything more certain than that in this wretched world of ours. The Hokage just muttered some profanities before nodding. Very well then. Kumo shall hear what you have to say. We have a window of about a month to carry out an attack, Sakuma explained. Hanabi Hyuga will become of age in about 3.5 weeks. On that day, there will be a challenge match between her and the first Princess Hinata. The winner of the match will immediately become appointed as the Crown Princess, which removes the possibility of a smooth takeover on my part. While my wish is to remove both heiresses permanently, it is too much of a difficult task to fully carry out. Instead, I want to use an indirect method, such as, grunted the man. If the large oaf weren't a Kage, Sakuma would have ended his miserable life right there. Didn't have a single bone of dignity in his body. Sakuma felt sick just being next to the despicable oaf. Sakuma cursed fate for forcing him to take power in such an undignified manner. He should have been the one to be the clan head, not the damned fool Hayashi who had been weaker than his own branch house brother. If Sakuma had been the clan head, then the Fourth Shinobi World War wouldn't have taken its toll on the Hyuga clan. Instead of volunteering to send his own clansmen out to the front lines, he would have held them back in reserve. The rest of Konoha had a duty to protect the nobles, not the other way around. Hayashi's sense of duty to a village they owed nothing to was disgusting and unbecoming of a Hyuga. Hayashi needed to be replaced by someone who would lead the Hyuga to greatness, not run it into the ground. Ultimately, I just need to have the potential heirs out of the way. The first princess has a certain fetish for undignified brutes, Sakura spat out. She is in love with a certain Naruto Uzumaki. Uzumaki! I pounded the desk and destroyed it. I'm going to kill that idealistic brat one day. He talked of peace and prosperity for all. Yet ever since the last war, Kumo has been losing business to Konoha. This cannot stand. Sakura mentally scoffed as he sidestepped the wooden pieces from the desk flying his way. How did such a narrow-minded fool ever become the Hokage? Sakura had just mentioned a name and the Hokage went out of control. I simply had no control over his emotions, just like that Uzumaki brat. I understand your anger and I can sympathize, Sakura said silkily. Uzumaki has an unusual influence in our village and his idealism has infected much of the populace. It is rather difficult to enact order when people are shouting about morals. Oof. Well, what is your proposal and what does it have to do with Uzumaki? As a Kage, you have considerable influence, even in other nations, Sakura began carefully. It tore at his pride that he needed the help of an idiot like the Hokage, but it couldn't be helped. It would be yet another sacrifice that he had to make to rule the Hyuga clan. I request that you use that influence to try and force Uzumaki into an arranged marriage. Konoha has always been averse to conflict and will not be able to refuse. It certainly does help us, but how does getting Uzumaki out of your village help you? I asked suspiciously. Konoha will refuse to marry someone as. Sakura paused. It would be painful to compliment the boy, powerful as the boy, away to someone in another country. Instead, they will force him to marry someone within Konoha to justify a refusal of a marriage alliance. I see, the Hokage muttered. You would have your older Hyuga princess marry Uzumaki. That would leave only one heiress for you to get rid of, which is where your plan would come in. Sakura was impressed. Given how the conversation had gone on so far, he didn't think the Hokage had the intelligence to put that together. Uzumaki's personality is such that he would not want to be married to someone he does not know. He is. Another pause, idealistic as you say, and believes in the power of love. My sources tell me that while any young woman in Konoha would love to be matched with Uzumaki, Uzumaki himself is only close to a handful of other girls in his generation. He had been involved with Sakura Haruno, but she is now dead. He also knows the Yamanaka heir and the Kurama heir, but coincidentally, neither of them have any interest in him. It is very likely that our first princess will be the one matched with him. What about contingency plans? Kumo does not operate on what is likely. We operate on truth. There is no guarantee that your heiress will be married to him. And if things don't go your way, you would have to withdraw from this operation and we would have just used our political capital in other countries for no reason. If Uzumaki chooses another girl, I shall either bribe the family to withdraw their daughter as a potential marriage candidate or arrange for an accident to happen. Money goes quite a long way, Lord Hokage. Why this roundabout way? Wouldn't it have been easier to wait till one of the heirs becomes the clan head and then assassinate her? With the second heir sealed, that would leave the seat of the clan head open for the taking. Foreign powers have already attempted to steal the Byakugan before. Sakura was careful not to mention that it was Kumo that had tried to do so it would keep suspicion off of me if one of the princesses were kidnapped. I see, I grunted out again. Killing an heiress would only invite unwanted suspicion and an investigation. If you can blame it on us, then there would be no investigation along your end. You want to do this before one of the princess becomes the crown princess or clan head so that security is somewhat lighter. Indeed. If Hinata is sent off in marriage, there will be a time frame where the Hyuga will pay attention to the marriage and not on our own internal matters. The coronation of the crown princess will be set back, giving us more time to prepare and less security to deal with. On the other hand, if the challenge match took place, the coronation would happen immediately. The Hokage nodded. Very well, you have our cooperation. We shall sway the public opinion of several countries to push for arranged marriages with Uzumaki. The land of spring, the land of birds, and the demon country all have female rulers. I will notify my contacts in all three countries. As agreed, you will supply the means for us to kidnap the second princess. I believe you said her name is Hanabi Hyuga, correct? Sakura nodded. Yes, I will provide an opening for whatever squad you might send as long as they cannot be traced back to me. The Hokage stood up and left the small room. As Sakura transformed into a man with green eyes and dark skin, as was typical of those living in Kumo, he smiled. He was the smartest and the most powerful of the Hyuga. It was only his misfortune that he was not born into the royal family of the Hyuga. He would take by force what is his destiny. In his opinion, both of the princesses were weak because of a genetic flaw. A Byakugan from such weak girls couldn't compare with the Byakugan of the true Hyuga. The Hokage could celebrate all he wanted, but he would only be getting a defective Byakugan. The Hyuga clan had no need for such trash anyway. Sakura laughed. In a month, he would be the new ruler of the Hyuga clan. The new Hyuga clan would be feared across the entire continent. Secret Hospital Room, Konoha, March 5, AK-22. Ino pulled her back from Sakura's head and turned to face the other three in the room. She shook her head to give them her answer. There's been no change in her status from a psychological point of view. Luckily, she still appears to be dreaming. Ino couldn't keep the slight anger out of her tone. When she said luckily, it sounded slightly sarcastic. Even after 2 months, her best friend was still incapacitated and showed no sign of waking up. What was worse was that they had no leads on who the culprit was. Medically, her muscles are showing some signs of atrophy. It's nothing serious, but even with the nutrients we are giving her through her muscles are beginning to break down from lack of use, Shizen added. In fact, I'm surprised they lasted almost 8 weeks without any atrophy. We still have no leads on who did this. I've sent squads of ANBU to Naruto's neighborhood to investigate and there's still nothing. Can't you keep checking? Ino demanded. Her best friend was hurt and the attacker was still at large. She would not give up. At this point, we might have to just close the investigation for now, Shikamaru murmured softly. This is getting us nowhere. Ino was about to snap at him when the Hokage raised his hand to stop her. Ino, I know it's difficult to accept, but we need those ANBU out on the field. Naruto's already been running the gauntlet for the last few years, and he's showing signs of mental fatigue. I can't continue asking him to solo most of the consecutive S-rank missions that he gets. I've sent him on 38 in the last 2 years alone and he usually gets less than a day in between them as a break. 38? Solo? Ino repeated incredulously. She had barely done 2 in the last 6 years. Many people didn't survive past 3. And that was in squads. That's 1.5 S-rank missions per month. Some S-rank missions take half a year, that's why we had to send Naruto. He's incredibly fast at getting missions done. We really did not have a choice, the Hokage explained. In a given year, we get close to 25 S-rank requests. After the war, we were down to fewer than 4,000 ninjas including those on reserve. We couldn't afford to send out full squads on such missions with incredibly high mortality rates, nor could we have people out on the field for that long on one mission. We would have been weakening ourselves further. Ino was still flabbergasted at the number. One of her own S-rank missions had been to the Land of the Woods to eliminate the remnants of the vicious Prajna group that had sworn vengeance on Konoha for an unknown reason. There were rumors that an ANBU division had independently attempted to wipe them out many years ago, but they were unconfirmed. That battle had been the second scariest in her life, after the battle with the Jubi during the war. It had been the 4 Konoha ninjas against 28 Prajna ninjas and she had been the only one to make it out alive. Naruto was doing those kinds of missions solo, and 38 of those consecutively without rest in the last 2 years. Ino turned to look at Sakura. She was torn from wanting justice for her best friend and wanting to help her best friend's boyfriend who was also her childhood friend. Why did those two things have to be mutually exclusive? Didn't they have anywhere else they could cut back on? Ino, we've been really short-handed since the end of the last war, Shikamaru repeated the sixth's words as she nodded. After all, her father had died in the war. She knew that there had been losses. But the mission requests kept coming though, and we did not have the capacity to accept all the requests without making some sacrifices. And you're saying that Naruto is just a sacrifice? Ino hissed. Naruto wasn't one of her closest friends, but she knew how much of a difficult life he has had. Now he was being asked to do even more for the village. Is that all you view him as? She demanded. I'm a psychologist and I know that even one of those kinds of missions can mentally scar even the hardiest of people. You're going to kill him at this rate. If not on the field, then indirectly because he'll take his own life to end the misery. I'm going to do a mental checkup on him the first chance I get. The sixth shook his head. The QB's chakra also buffers against mental fatigue, so we can push him a little harder than most. A little? Ino felt like screaming. I still get nightmares from my own S-rank mission. You're having him do that day and night. QB chakra or not, that's going to take a toll on a human. Her eyes narrowed dangerously, of course, unless you're calling him a demon. She got some vindictive pleasure when the gray-haired Hokage jerked back as if he had been slapped in the face. Ino, Shikamaru said in a low tone. You're being unreasonable here. That comment was uncalled for. The Hokage recovered as she gave a scathing glare at the shadow user. She was only looking out for her friends. There was nothing unreasonable about that, Lord Kakashi sighed. With Naruto taking the bulk of the worst missions, we were able to keep everyone else alive and training. Now we're almost back to where we were before the war. It's not a great place to be, even those numbers were nothing like the numbers we had before Tsunade and Oto invaded. Even so, I understand that Naruto is carrying an immense load. I'm trying to give him a break by having him become a Jounin sensei. That's why it's imperative that we end this investigation quickly. We need those ANBU back out on the field, TCH. Ino crossed her arms, still not convinced. I don't understand why all those missions are necessary to begin with. Sabotage, espionage, assassinations. Why do we do those things at all and still claim that we desire peace? No matter how you look at this, we're doing the same things that the other countries are by looking out for only our best interests. Ino, Shikamaru groaned. Ino threw him a look. They had had these discussions often and Shikamaru always brushed her off as troublesome. We're in front of the Hokage, okay? Just give it a rest. A lot of these missions aren't just for money or to expand our power. Most of Konoha's S-rank missions, as far as the ones that I know of, are counter-espionage and protection from assassinations. The assassination orders that do go out are to kill people deemed incredibly dangerous to Konoha. These things need to be done. Ino stepped back when her teammates' eyes grew cold. Or I suppose you rather have the fire daimyo killed every other week? She sighed. She knew all that they did was necessary, but that didn't mean she had to like it. The last war was supposed to be the war to end all wars, and yet, just 1 year after the war ended, the Grand Ninja Alliance fell apart and the villages were at each other's throats again. Ino suspected that even though most of the shinobi were tired of fighting, the royals and the nobles in the capitals of the countries were still too ambitious and greedy to actually want peace. But why Naruto? She argued. You're closer to him than I am. You should know just how much he's done for the village. By the end of his career, he'll be nothing but a shell of a human being. Ino, Lord Kakashi interrupted, I'm his sensei. How do you think I feel about doing this to him? Do you think I like torturing him? But, he went on, being his sensei, I know Naruto can take the punishment and come out stronger for it. And he has. I had and have faith in him. I suggest you have a little more faith in Naruto as well. He's the man who saved us all. But. Ino stammered. That was true. It had slipped her mind that Lord Kakashi was probably hurting the most. And did you forget that Sakura is another of my precious students as well, and the person that my student and future successor loves the most? He asked in a strained voice. I take no pleasure in doing this. None. But these things are necessary for the village. Ino wanted to argue, so she looked at Shizune, the one person who might be sympathetic to her cause. Ino found the older woman shaking her head. It appeared that Shizune wasn't too happy either, but had either given up arguing or agreed with the Hokage's assessment. Ino sighed. She was glad that she wasn't the Hokage. These types of decisions were way too complicated for her. Ino, Shikamaru said in a kind voice. It's not like Sakura's going to die anytime soon. We've already started to uncover parts of the seal. Ibiki goes over those seals with the leading sealing elites and experts in our village every single day to try to break Sakura out of this. We can worry about finding the culprit then. Sakura will understand the sacrifice we have to make to keep her boyfriend. He shifted around to find the right word, sane as you put it. Ino gave up and just nodded. She looked back at her pink-haired friend. She was just another casualty of the world they lived in. Just how many people had to be sacrificed until the hate and the bloodthirst of the world would be satisfied? Chapter 6, Introduction, Territory of the Masters. Forests near the border of Land of Hot Water, Land of Rice Fields, and the Land of Fire, March 14, AK-22. Finally. Mission accomplished. Hanabi stared stoically at her brown-haired subordinate who had a wide grin on his face. Say that after we're safely clear of the Land of Hot Water and back to Konoha. Make sure to keep your guard up on the way back. Taichi Ayo crossed his arms. Ah. Don't be like that, Captain. We just spent a week on edge because we were guarding a daimyo during negotiations for the price of rice wine. We all know that nothing ever happens on these kinds of missions. It's just that the nobles are paranoid and self-satisfied pricks that they pay for an A-ranked mission. That may be the case, Ayo, but never let your guard down, she returned in a soft voice. There were so many situations in the past where letting her guard had cost her. Her own teammates had died because of an ambush. If she had had the sense and the awareness to activate her Byakugan earlier, then they might not have died. People said that she was too harsh on herself, but Hanabi knew it had been her job to prepare her teammates for any possible attack. It wasn't feasible to keep her bloodline on all the time, but she should have had it activated at random intervals and done regular checks whenever possible. The kid does have a point, you know. Hanabi turned to the other female member of her squad. It was 1010, her late cousin's old genin teammate. I could definitely use the extra pay, so I'm not complaining, but this mission was a total bore. I agree. There was not enough youthfulness on this mission. I must make up for the lost time with extra training. I will try to lift up this rock with one of my nose. If I can't to that, then I'll. Hanabi turned out the vigorous statements of youth from the final member of the squad. She never understood how Niji dealt with Lee back when the two were genin teammates. She was fairly familiar with him and 1010 since they often visited Niji when he had been alive and because she worked with them on quite a few missions, but she still couldn't help feeling irritated by Lee's antics. Still, she wouldn't admit it, and least of all to Ayo, but there was something off about this mission. Hanabi had learned in her classes that before the Fourth War, scrupulous nobles regularly hired A-ranks for protection in addition to having their own samurai guards, each of which could stand against a chunin or even a jounin. But even then, only one A-rank would be requested, and those were more dangerous times. There definitely was no need for two A-rank ninjas on this mission, even if one of those two was officially classified only as a special jounin. Perhaps there was a shady deal going on that required more protection. And genin are D rank by default, shonin are C rank, jounin are B rank by default, with special jounin being somewhere in between B and C. Elite jounin are A ranks. There are no more than a couple dozen A ranks at most in each village. As for S ranks, there are only a couple dozen of these across the entire elemental nations. Note that there are exceptions. Naruto was classified as S rank as a genin after the war, and Lee is currently an A rank as a special jounin. But 1010 is the typical B rank, as are most members of the original Rookie 9. Ah well, I suppose Captain Hyuga does get paid to be paranoid. Ayo rolled his eyes while speaking in a mocking tone. She's the captain for a reason. Hanabi felt tempted to snap at the boy. As a Hyuga who was trained to read others, she knew that older teens had something of a crush on her. Hanabi initially didn't want to comment on it because it wouldn't be proper on a mission, but she was reaching breaking point. His little crush on her was flattering, but she could do without the attention and the little jabs here and there. Do you really have to bring that up every minute or something? 1010 grumbled. We get it. You're feeling emasculated because you're taking orders from a girl. It's not that. Ayo protested. Hanabi would have rolled her eyes at the chunin's protests and his attempts to explain himself. 1010 had something of an inferiority complex, so she would often automatically jump to the conclusion that the world was considering her and other kunoichi weak. That mindset prevented 1010 from seeing the true reason why Ayo kept pestering Hanabi. It worked well in this case. Hanabi did not want to spend the next few days being teased by her older teammates. Lee especially would shout something about the springtime of youth and how love was youthful. Speaking of which, Hanabi turned to her other teammate. She felt herself about to twitch in annoyance when she saw that he was trying to climb a tree with 2 fingers. Lee would never change. Then what is it? 1010 demanded. I'm just trying to get a reaction out of her. Ayo quickly explained. It's just that the elites have some kind of He too turned to look at the spandex-wearing ninja, who was now trying to use his forehead to knock down a tree. Strange quirk. Lee-senpai can't speak 10 words without saying something about youth, and Captain Hanabi is like the ice princess or something. She won't even call me by my first name even after 2 weeks. I'm trying to figure out how to advance in my career, so I'm paying attention to how my superiors are. He was lying, of course, but Hanabi allowed him to save face in front of Tenten. More importantly, his comment made her pause for a moment. Io did have a point. Hanabi herself felt the same way about Uzumaki. He had some interesting quirks himself. She shook her head. Even after nearly 2 weeks, she couldn't get her mind off the toad sage. The feeling of his powerful aura when blocked her 8 trigrams vacuum palm was fresh in her mind, and the embarrassing situation during their training accident did not help her to forget about him in the least. There was also the fact that he was intriguing. The main house generally did not like the toad sage. They grudgingly accepted that he was physically strong and had the respect of most of the village, but they claimed that he was too idealistic and too disrespectful. The Hyuga clan respected order and hierarchy, which was everything Uzumaki stood against. Uzumaki was too kind to others and showed too much empathy and softness towards others. Yet, in her meetings with him, the toad sage challenged her original perceptions of power. He was brash, but he was charismatic. He wasn't stoic, but he still felt deadly. It was hard to get a complete read on the man. For someone who was supposed to wear his emotions on his sleeves, Uzumaki was quite the mystery. Crackle! Hanabi instantly tensed and got ready for battle, noting with satisfaction that both Lee and Tenten heard the noise also. She had done a check in the area 10 minutes before, so it couldn't possibly be an enemy. But the noise was too loud and deliberate to be some wild animal. There was no ominous chakra being emitted, but a chakra signal could always be hidden through special armors. Hanabi quickly activated her Byakugan to check once more. It may very well be an incredibly fast enemy. Byakugan. She intoned mentally. Hey, what's wrong? Io asked, noting the shift in attitude around them. Hanabi's eyes widened as she tried to push Io out of the way. Watch OU. Before any of them could react further, a huge man jumped in front of the brown-haired teen and hit him with a powerful punch. Her Byakugan told her that Io's entire chest was crushed and that fragments of his ribs were puncturing almost every organ. Io was dead before he even hit the tree. Hanabi ducked under his second swing and let the huge fist pass over her. She and her remaining teammates jumped back and stood in a triangular formation. Weak, the man shouted. Ninjas from the great villages are weak. Hanabi frowned at what her Byakugan was telling her and ignored the fact that one of her teammates had just died. Hanabi felt a pang of guilt, but she would worry about that later, especially since this man appeared to be incredibly fast, just about as fast as she was. There was nothing she could have done. If anything, she had just barely dodged the second blow herself. The man was covered in strange flame-shaped markings and had a circular seal with the yin-yang-like symbol on his forehead. The strange part was that the 2 swirls of the yin-yang circle were separated, making them look like 2 different commas going in opposite directions rather than a full yin-yang circle. Furthermore, Hanabi couldn't see any chakra. She could see inside of him just fine, but she couldn't see any chakra flowing through the body. Even a dead body would have a foreign source of chakra to power it. The only thing this person had was an extremely thin layer of chakra surrounding his entire body. It was so thin that she could barely see it. It must be Fuinjutsu preventing my eyes from seeing any chakra inside of his body. But only the Hyuga could come up with a seal that blocks our own eyes. And what she saw confirmed that it wasn't a Hyuga seal. Why would someone create a seal that only blocks visualization of chakra flow? It appeared almost as if the person who designed those seals forgot that the Hyuga can attack more than just the chakra points. Still, she would proceed cautiously. She wasn't ready to die just yet. She still had lots of things in life she wanted to do. She wanted to explore the countryside, take a trip across the ocean, and of course, find a person to love. None of those things were really possible while she was the Hyuga princess, but she always hoped that she would one day be free. There was no way she would let her life end because of a careless mistake in some random forest. Lee, take point. 10-10, provide ranged support. I'll jump in if there is an opening. Alright, sounds like a plan, 10-10 agreed as she took out several large scrolls. Let's kick this guy's butt for what he did to Taichi. Yash. Lee shouted out, half in anger about the death of their teammate and half in excitement for the battle. Hanabi and Lee ran towards the burly man as 1010 provided ranged support to prevent the man from maneuvering to the sides and outflanking them. Strangely enough, the man did nothing but snarl. He drew his arm back just as Lee started to attack. She frowned. She couldn't hear any chakra being used or expelled as the man took his swing. That ruled out ninjutsu. Nonetheless, the swing was powerful enough to make Lee wince in pain even with his guard up. That made no sense. It was almost impossible for anyone to have strength to hit Lee head-on and come out on top without the use of any ninjutsu. Hanabi observed as Lee ducked under the next kick, clearly electing to dodge rather than block. The man's fighting technique was rather poor and easy to read, but there was some trick to it that she couldn't figure out. Seeing an opening, she quickly flashed forward with a palm strike. Even if she couldn't see the chakra points, she could still see his organs and damage those. To her shock, however, the chakra in her hands dissipated as soon as she got close. What the? Hanabi, get out of the way. Focusing on the situation at hand, she jumped over the downward punch as Lee kicked the man in the back of the head, knocking him forward. Close-range battle was dangerous. She needed to get more information before she jumped in. Her mind flashing back to Uzumaki, she quickly flew her hands through signs. Water release, burst whip, you little pests. Die, roared the burly man as Lee tried an uppercut. Lee! Back, she shouted as she jumped back to where 1010 was. Using her water whip, she tried to grab onto the man only to find the water falling out of her control before disappearing altogether when it got near him. Lee had noticed it as well and swerved midway through a kick. TCH, she heard 1010 mutter from next to her. Just as her water technique disappeared, 1010 had launched a spiked cannonball with an explosive tag on it. Boom! 1010, that's not going to work, Hanabi said, seeing through the explosion. What the hell is he? 1010 muttered as the smoke cleared. The man was hurt, but only because of the broken pieces of the ball that had been blasted towards him from the explosion. The explosion itself didn't hurt him. You saw it, didn't you, Lee? Hanabi asked. Yes. Just as I hit him, I felt the part of my foot that kicked him lose its youth. I also had confirmation when I saw that your water technique dissipated as it got close to him. Those markings look somewhat familiar. I believe that it is the source of his power. If the situation were not so dire, Hanabi might have rolled her eyes as his comment about youth. Even during a battle, he spoke in that ridiculous way of his. But Lee was correct, the man had some ability to reduce their fighting strength. Furthermore, he was somewhat difficult to see with her Byakugan because he had no chakra flow. She had grown accustomed to differentiating the different chakra signals when she had her bloodline activated, but all she saw was a black spot with gray organs. It was probably why the man had been able to sneak up on them. It was likely that she assumed that he was something dead or inanimate when she did a quick sweep of the area with her eyes earlier. Pathetic! How did the great villages control the world for so long with such meager strength? He shouted. While the man was ranting and pounding his chest like a wild gorilla, the man was dangerous and Hanabi made sure to keep her eyes on him as she talked with her teammates. You mean that he has some kind of power that weakens us? 1010 asked. It's hard to say, Hanabi answered. This is merely a hypothesis at this point, but I think his body repels and disperses all forms of chakra. I noticed that the chakra in my hand disappeared the moment it came in contact with him. The same was true for my water technique. We all use chakra as the basis for all our techniques, so our attacks become ineffective the moment we touch him. Chakra-based techniques are completely ineffective. I think it has to do with some of the seals he has on his body. That would explain why the explosive tag didn't work because the explosion itself is chakra-based. But Lee only uses taijutsu, 1010 frowned. That doesn't require chakra. Hanabi shook her head as they dodged the charging man. No. All living things have chakra. So even the most basic movements require some chakra. It is the reason why the people cannot even stand when even only as few as 64 of their 361 chakra points are hit. Lee is only unable to mold and shape that chakra, he still uses it to enhance his muscles. Then how is he using so much power without chakra? 1010 demanded. If his seals are what is making him immune to chakra, then they should work both ways. Seals that distinguish the user from the surroundings are incredibly complex and difficult to make. It's not just chakra nullification, Lee said as he flipped over the man and landed another kick on him that lost most of its power. I remember now where I saw these seals, or at least the ones with those flame patterns that are all over his body. The legendary Sannin Orochimaru used to place these on his men as a youthful way to boost their power. He might be using the flame-shaped seals as a power boost, while the other strange circular seal that has the yin-yang-like symbol on it might be preventing attacks from affecting him. You call that a kick? Roared the crazed man. That felt like a love tap. Hanabi frantically tried to figure out what to do. There was no point in arguing over what gave the man his strange powers. None of that changed the fact that they were fighting an opponent who had a massive boost in power, while their own techniques were completely ineffective. Lee voiced her thoughts. What do you suppose we do? Both your gentle fist and my strong fist are ineffective against him, Lee grunted out. Their opponent had clearly decided that Lee needed to be the next one to die. Hanabi briefly wondered if the man was attracted to green, akin to how bulls were attracted to red. Die! 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 The man roared, charging straight into another tree and destroying it. Fortunately, as long as we maintain our distance, we won't die. He's fast, but he doesn't seem to be as agile as we are. Keep jumping around and making sharp turns. Just make sure to not get touched. If he grabs a hold of us though, we'll be helpless. That doesn't solve our problem. I doubt he'll just let us keep dodging, and we don't know whether or not we'll end up tiring before he does. We need to fight him here while we have our full strength. Hanabi went through all the available information. Pure taijutsu was ineffective. That took Lee out. Ninjutsu, taijutsu, or chakra-based taijutsu were out. That ruled her out. Tenten's fighting style revolved heavily around the use of explosive tags, and those were only minimally effective. Hanabi supposed they could try to draw him into the center of a trap and knock all the trees down at once with the tags, but that was probably too difficult given that their enemy just kept smashing any tree in his way. Fuinjutsu, Tenten's secondary specialty, was no good either. She looked at Tenten, who threw a dozen projectiles to give Lee the space to dodge. Projectiles themselves were too weak and were too easily dodged. Wait, Tenten, what's the deadliest longest ranged weapon you have while still maintaining a high degree of speed, accuracy, and agility? Tenten's eyes widened in realization and thought for a second. I suppose a sword, staff, or spear. I have more weapons that provide range, but they're all too easy to dodge and would leave me completely open to a counterattack. Those tools are only good for one hit. I was hoping for something longer, but it'll have to be a sword then, Hanabi remarked as she caught a katana from the other girl. She wasn't an expert, much less an elite, with weapons, but she could still hold her own for some time. I wasn't aware that you knew how to fight with weapons. From what Niji used to tell me, the Hyuga clan never allowed any of their members to use anything other than the gentle fist. I was already shocked that you just used water ninjutsu. Hanabi nodded. You're correct, but I still had to go through the basic jounin training. You will have to take a point though. I can only fight a delaying action with a sword. Let's go relay the message to Lee so he can start using his nunchaku. And make sure not to channel chakra into your blade. She thanked whatever deity out there for giving her the foresight to practice with other styles of fighting. It probably was going to end up being the thing that saved her life that day. Roger. Oto, Land of Rice Fields, March 14, AK-22. Kabuto. Kabuto almost jumped when he heard the voice, but gave no indication that he had been startled. He feared Shinobi for a reason, after all. He couldn't let people know that he was afraid of himself. Ah, it's you again. Taiyu no kor wa kokuten. You know it's rude not to knock. Kabuto said in a pleasant tone. Spare me the pleasantries, Kabuto, came the curt response. Kabuto frowned. As always, the man was cloaked, hooded, and masked, so it was hard to tell who it was. The voice sounded slightly garbled, no doubt with a voice modifier. And the man spoke in an irritating, archaic manner. I'm here to deliver the next batch. The man pulled out a box containing many small sheets of paper. Kabuto nodded as he examined the seals. The design inside the yin-yang components looked slightly different from the last batch. What changed? Kokuten was silent for a moment, no doubt thinking about how to phrase his response. If there was one thing certain about this man, it was that he was quite deliberate, even with his words. While the dispersion seal protects the user from any chakra-based damage, the converse is true as well. Since chakra is disrupted the moment it crosses the seal, which is placed on the skin, the user is also unable to use anything other than taijutsu. I am looking for a way to circumvent this flaw. Considering that most ninjas rely heavily on ninjutsu, the seals are quite effective as is, Kabuto casually remarked. Even taijutsu relies on subconscious enhancement of muscles with chakra. I wouldn't go as far to say that your seals have a flaw. You are already able to increase the nullification range to 1 centimeter away from the user while still allowing the user to use chakra within his or her body. It's quite the accomplishment. The payment? You still didn't answer my question, Kabuto said with a small frown. Kabuto had no doubt that the person in front of him was quite strong, but he had a couple of trump cards of his own. One of which included having found a way to reuse the previous sets of seals that he received. With a few more sets of these seals, he would no longer need the cloaked man. It would be nice to know what these seals do before I let my men use them. The new effects are in the testing phase. I cannot say with any certainty as to what they will do. The only thing I can say with certainty is that they will not die. Ah, but tell me what they're designed for, Kabuto returned. I'm not quite a Fuinjutsu master, but I am an academic and can appreciate a nice long conversation of chakra theory. Kabuto decided to throw in a veiled threat. I've studied the Sharingan and the bodies of different members of the Uchiha for years and know quite a lot of forcibly molding chakra. Kabuto prepared himself for an attack. Kabuto suspected that his last statement meant something to the cloaked man. Do not waste my time, Kokuten replied, not giving any indication that he cared, much less try to figure out who I am. I did no such thing, Kabuto said silkily, even though he was lying. The other man was quite skilled in hiding his emotions and even better at reading them. Kokuten was dangerous. The man's tone became serious. I require the payment now. I should remind you that I have no true need for you. I can always find other buyers for my seals. You, on the other hand, need these seals to keep your operations going. Your sound forces are outmatched in both quality and quantity. These seals are the only things keeping you going. Not even your pathetic research has provided you with a way to keep up with the great villages. Kabuto resisted the desire to grit his teeth in anger. Kabuto was normally mild-mannered, but Kokuten always took the opportunity to insult his work and his efforts. Kabuto didn't care about strength, but he did care about his research. Strength was only a means to an end. Strength allowed him to gain better subjects and more funding for his research. Research that was invaluable to the world and helped in the evolution of mankind. Kabuto took a few deep breaths to calm down and gave his best smile. Kabuto wouldn't let his opponent know that he was irritated. Emotions were like cards in a game of poker. They had to be played carefully and at the right time. How about a business transaction then? As you mentioned, I am outmatched in numbers. So I can't simply use unknown seals on my men. While they might not die, there might be effects that prevent them being able to fight again or reduce their usefulness. That is something I wish to avoid. So, for information on your newest and subsequent batches, instead of giving you written reports, I'll give you information on where I'm sending my men so you can see your seals in action for yourself when they encounter hostile ninjas. Think of it as a field testing for your experiments. There was a long pause. Kabuto knew that he was grasping at straws because not a single man had died as a result of Kokuten's seals. If anything, given Kokuten's mastery in Fuinjutsu, these newest batches had already been perfected in terms of adverse events. Even the failures in the past did nothing to negatively affect any of his men. Still, part of what Kabuto said had been true. He did appreciate a good discussion on theory. He wasn't as obsessed with finding the meaning of the world as Orochimaru was, but he did want to have the knowledge and the infinite amount of resources to carry out experiments in order to create a much more beautiful world. I do not need to observe the results myself. Furthermore, I tire of your constant attempts to find loopholes in my orders. Do not think for 1 second that I don't know that your men are goading ninjas from other villages so your men can act in self-defense. You are intentionally trying to move against the great villages and the big 5 nations without my approval. Kabuto frowned. How did this man know that? Was the man following his men already on their different missions? If so, Kabuto needed to take care of Kokuten as quickly as possible. Right now it didn't appear as if Kokuten knew of Kabuto's ultimate plan, but that may change. I shall relay strict commands to my men, Kabuto said in an apologetic tone. It may appear as if I gave that order, but because of the background of my men, most of his forces were bandits and low-class missing ninjas, it is rather difficult to fully control them. They are like raging beasts, not at all like cultured and educated men as we are. I assure you that this will not happen anymore. Kokutin paused before nodding. Very well. I accept your apology and, for now, I will even ignore your little tricks. But I will ask for double the payment. Kabuto frowned. Money wasn't too difficult to get, not that he was going after missing ninjas, but double the amount he normally paid was a high price. Still, information was useful and more important than money. So Kabuto nodded in agreement. Agreed. Now the explanation? What do you know about using other sources of power instead of chakra? Land of Hot Water, March 14, AK-22. Hanabi painted lightly as she dodged a kick. Hanabi flipped over while slashing with her sword at her newest enemy who had just arrived. She then quickly body flickered back to where her two teammates were. All things considered, their plan to only use weapons and with Tenten taking the lead had gone well. Tenten had managed to cut the big crazed oaf down, but apparently the enemy had been part of a squad. They were now facing off 3 more ninjas. While they did not appear to be physical tanks as the first ninja who had kept fighting despite dozens of deep wounds, these 3 seemed to be much more intelligent. They also looked furious at seeing their teammate go down. Hanabi glanced at her teammates with her Byakugan. She and they had wasted too much chakra trying to deal with the first ninja. They weren't wounded in the least, and still had plenty of energy left, but they were starting to get tired from spending too much chakra in an effort to dodge all the blows. An example was when Hanabi had found herself a few centimeters away from being grabbed. She had instinctively spun into a Kaiten, but instead of knocking the man back, all it did was slow him down as the dense chakra slowly dissipated on contact with the man. That extra second or two provided the time she needed to escape, but had cost a significant amount of chakra. She was sure she was fairly certain that she was stronger than all the 3 ninjas in front of her combined, but with her best techniques ineffective, she was worried she might tire herself out before we could find a proper opening to kill them. At the moment, though, it didn't appear as if she was going to be attacked. By default, her range with the full 360-degree vision was around 1 kilometer, but she could extend that to nearly 10 kilometers by focusing in just one direction. Conversely, she could narrow the vision to 50 meters around her if she wanted even greater clarity of vision over range, such as seeing the chakra points of her opponents, which she usually did in a battle. Right now, however, she needed to check to see if there were going to be any more enemies. Hanabi consciously extended the range of her Byakugan and quickly did a visual sweep of the area. I see someone in a cloak a little more than 1 kilometer away, holding a telescope towards this direction. Was he watching this battle the whole time? Hanabi did not miss the fact that he stood just outside the range of her Byakugan. That was no accident. The man was clearly informed of the capacities of the Byakugan and the habits of the Hyuga. Hinata, being the only Hyuga to be a regular part of a scouting and espionage squad, regularly used the telescopic capabilities of the Byakugan, but most Hyuga were combat-oriented and preferred not to sacrifice the 360-degree vision that came with their regular Byakugan mode. They too, like Hanabi, preferred using the narrow and microscopic 50-meter vision so that they could see the chakra points in their opponents' bodies. In any case, she would not have found this strange, cloaked man without shifting to the telescopic abilities of her eyes. This man was already aware of their identities. Her eyes narrowed as she shifted them back to the default state to regain the full range of vision around her. "We've been ordered not to avoid fights with ninjas as much as possible," one of them said, while taking up a battle stance, "but those orders didn't include times when we were attacked first." "Hey! Your buddy down there attacked us first and even killed one of our teammates," Tenten shouted. She glared at the red-haired man who looked ready to kill. The enemies ignored Tenten. Another one placed his hand on the shoulder of the one who assumed a battle stance. "Hey, stop it. Boss is going to be mad. No one's going to miss Muzo. Besides, we're running low on time. I estimate there's only about 5 minutes left at most. 5 minutes is more than enough to take out these pieces of trash. This mission was a waste of my time and I'm in the mood for nailing some ladies." The one with the white eyes looks rather exotic. Hanabi felt a surge of rage at that comment, but stamped that down in favor of regaining as much chakra as she could. She made a note to thank Uzumaki again for preparing her to deal with lewd comments and then internally groaned when she realized she had been thinking about him again. Damn it, she was becoming worse than Hinata. Hanabi made a sarcastic mental comment to herself that such traits must run in the family. Trash? Do you not recognize her? The lone female member in the squad was pointing at her. That's Hanabi Hyuga. You're going to get us killed, idiot. Get late on your own time. Not while on a damn mission. Get your hands off me. A Hyuga? That's even better. I bet boss will reward us if we manage to capture her. Of course, that's after I've had my way with her. Hanabi readied herself and saw her teammates getting ready for battle as their enemies tried to stop their red-haired teammate. She whispered to her teammates, "These guys have the same abilities as the first. Do not let them touch you. Also, there is someone about a kilometer away watching us. It may be an enemy, so we'll have to conserve as much chakra as we can to escape or fight if he comes." She received quick nods. "If you bastards want to go back, then you can go by yourselves," the first man roared as black marking covered him. Hanabi pulled her sword in front of her to parry when the man she saw in the distance suddenly appeared before them and grabbed the blade with a gloved hand. Instantly, she and her teammates jumped back into one of the trees to avoid whatever danger that might have appeared. When it became clear that it was the same man that Hanabi had warned her teammates about, Tenten turned to her. "Hanabi, I thought you said he was about a kilometer away." Tenten hissed in an alarmed tone. "Tenten, Hanabi wasn't wrong or trying to mislead us," Lee said before Hanabi could defend herself. "He was uncharacteristically serious. That was a spacetime ninjutsu. An incredibly advanced one at that." Tenten froze at that. It was well known that spacetime ninjutsu could only be used by ninjutsu masters. This man was not weak. Hanabi kept her eyes on the man while keeping up her guard. "Yes. He's quite skilled if he was able to cross a distance of more than a kilometer in less than a second with such precision. That's difficult to do even with spacetime ninjutsu. Hey! Who the hell are you? You were ordered to never be the aggressors," the man said in a slightly garbled voice. It appears that Kabuto really does keep his men on a rather loose leash. "Oh well, I suppose I already agreed to overlook the rash and reckless actions of his foolish followers." "Kabuto?" Lee asked in a low voice. "Wasn't that the one who created those undead bodies during the war?" Hanabi didn't know. She was far too young to be a big part of the war. She looked to Tenten for confirmation, but Tenten was too busy observing those below them. "How do you know about Lord Kabuto?" demanded the kunoichi as black markings started covering her too. "Change of plans. We can't let anyone in the area get away with that information. Attack now." The red-haired ninja ripped his sword out of the man's grip and tried to thrust the sword forward as the other two rushed forward to help. The cloaked man merely held up a single hand sign and held his other hand out. Fire release, Phoenix flame burst. Hanabi had to shield her eyes as fire-natured chakra erupted from the man's hand in the shape of a huge firebird before flashing forward at an incredibly fast speed. The chakra from the technique was intense. Such amazing power. That's more chakra than I have in my entire reserves. The huge wave of fire disappeared after about 10 seconds, revealing 3 completely charred bodies. Her jaw dropped. There was an indent in the earth 3 meters wide and a meter deep that extended for almost an entire kilometer. She personally hadn't seen such damage since the crater left by Pain during the Akatsuki invasion. She wasn't there to see the actual attack, but she did get to see the results. "What a shame," the man remarked as if he was talking about the weather. "The chakra dispersion limit was much lower than I thought. The seals are too easily overloaded when the input of chakra is that high. I had hoped that they would survive with those seals on, but it seemed like all it did was to reduce the damage to keep their bodies in one shape." Hanabi shivered slightly at the detached tone, not even bothering to hide her fear. The last fire technique contained more chakra than she had at full power, but the man didn't even look winded. If the man wanted to kill her, there was nothing she could do about it. Hanabi just continued to stare at the man with her mouth open, not caring about the undignified look she had on her face. This is the true difference in power between an A rank and S rank. I can see that the S ranks are called masters for a reason. The power gap between elites and masters is absolutely ridiculous. Is this the realm that Naruto Uzumaki lives in? Uzumaki again. She resigned herself to having him on her mind. There was a chance she could die and she might as well indulge herself before she did. Hanabi reflected on what people said about him. Some said that the Toad Sage was an idiot with too much power, but it was at that moment that she realized just how inaccurate that was. A fool with this much power would have already destroyed the village at the first insult hurled at him. If he was being an idiot, it was because he chose to portray himself as such. To control this amount of power required a tremendous amount of maturity and wisdom. Just how much did Uzumaki hide about himself from the world? She shook herself out of her thoughts and looked at the cloaked man. It appeared that he too was wearing something that circumvented the Byakugan's ability to see chakra flow. However, instead of the emptiness that she saw in the previous ninjas, she just saw a dim yellow light without any pathways or chakra points. Hanabi guessed that his chakra signal would be blinding had he not worn those black chakra-muting robes and cloak. The man turned to face them. Hanabi saw that even his face was covered with a black mask. There was nothing to tell her where he was from. Now then, Konoha Shinobi, what shall I do with you? Hanabi didn't dare answer and just stood there shivering in fear. Despite the lack of killing intent in the air, the man's aura was heavy. She looked at her teammates. Tenten wasn't faring any better and looked like she was about to pass out. Lee seemed to handle it much better than either of them, but Hanabi suspected that was because he experienced extremely high levels of killing at close range during the Fourth Shinobi World War. On the other hand, for Hanabi, it was the first time she was facing anyone putting out this much power. Lee jumped down smoothly, not appearing to care about pressure in the air. Hanabi knew better though. Her Byakugan saw through the act. Lee was extremely wary of the man and was looking for a way to escape. We do not wish to fight. We were merely fighting a defensive battle with those other ninjas. To think that you can move so freely under the full unrestrained pressure of my aura, the man commented in an impressed tone. Fantastic. Even the Hyuga. While she is mentally afraid of action, it appears that she is able to move her body at will. Your last teammate just fainted from the pressure, but still lasted quite longer than I expected. Not at all a bad squad, all things considered. Konoha has some talented ninjas. Hanabi forced herself to stop shivering and consciously expanded her chakra around her to shield herself from the effects of the chakra pressure a bit more. She felt the pressure diminish slightly, but not disappear. But it did become easier to ignore the part of her brain screaming at her to curl up into a ball and cry. She jumped down next to Lee. The man didn't seem bloodthirsty, so there was a chance that they might be able to talk their way out of this situation. My teammate is correct. We were finishing up a mission when we were attacked by what appeared to be a rabid ninja who had lost any sense of reason. Hanabi desperately prayed that this man would just walk away. A fight would not end in their favor. The man chuckled. And you want me to let you leave with your lives because you have no desire to fight me? What would you do if I said no? Hanabi didn't get a chance to contemplate her response as she saw Lee press the release on his weights, instantly open up 4 of the inner gates, and rush towards the man at incredible speeds that she herself was not capable of reaching. The entire process took less than a quarter of a second. His incredibly strong kick created a pressurized airwave that ended up knocking down more trees than she cared to count, but he still only hit air. Hanabi had her Byakugan on and was still not able to completely catch the motion. It was one of those rare moments she wished she had the Sharingan and its ability to perfectly catch, predict, and memorize motion rather than the distance, depth and range of vision that the Byakugan provided. Although, if she thought about it a second time, perhaps it was better that she couldn't see how outclassed she was. I suppose you answered my question, the man said in an amused tone, but your answer is quite foolish. It is especially foolish considering that I usually only attack those who attack me first. The man had somehow managed to outflank Lee and had gotten behind the kick. The man grabbed the back of Lee's neck and held him in the air. Lee screamed in pain and then stopped struggling altogether before he was tossed to the side. Lee didn't twitch. Something snapped in her as she saw her second teammate go down. Hanabi had already had one teammate die today and the dam she placed over her raging emotions burst. Without any regard for her own life, she charged at the man with a wild scream, unconsciously activating the Gentle Fist Twin Lion Fists and her personal invention Gentle Fist Twin Lion Feet as she ran. Arms and feet blazing with blue chakra, she jumped into the air and went for a kick with her left foot. The man ducked. She landed and twisted in one motion as if it were a dance and swung her right arm, and felt a jerk the instant she swung. Coming back to her senses, she realized that he had grabbed her palm. She didn't even know where to begin in figuring out how he grabbed her chakra-charged fist with no damage, but she reacted without even thinking. If pure chakra wasn't going to do damage, then water release, burst whip. She swung her other arm as quickly as she could and saw it hit his face, knocking his mask off and sending him to the ground. She frowned. There was something odd about this. How did she manage to hit the man when Lee had failed even after opening 4 of the release? She shouted as she broke the genjutsu. Her Byakugan had told her that a foreign force was manipulating her chakra. The genjutsu was highly subtle, as very few things about the scene had changed. It was probably why she had taken so long to figure out she was in a genjutsu. Being a Hyuga, she usually detected and broke the genjutsu techniques before they even took effect in her mind. This time, she had taken 5 seconds to notice something wrong with her system. The situation was never good to begin with, but this made it even worse. Her enemy was already skilled in ninjutsu, taijutsu, and fuinjutsu. But he even showed enough skill in genjutsu to fool her Byakugan for a few seconds. Forget S rank. Forget master level. This man was a god. I'm impressed, the man intoned from behind her. When did he? Hanabi frantically thought she was twisted and slammed her uninjured palm forward as hard as she could. Once again she felt a jerk a millisecond after she swung, and once again, the man had grabbed her hand. This time she flowed with her still present momentum from her initial twisting and shifted her feet in that same direction to activate Kaiten. Her Kaiten died before it even started and the chakras surrounding her limbs began to fade. She struggled to keep her techniques active. This man appeared to have some kind of ability to negate pure chakra attacks. It would have to be another elemental attack then. He had dodged the last one, so elemental attacks must be his weakness, if it could even be called that. At the very least, he would be forced to dodge again, but given the state her hand was in, she wouldn't be able to channel wind properly. Hanabi grit her teeth. She would be hurt, but she would at least do heavy damage to the man. Wind Release, she began. Stop, he commanded forcefully. If you activate that technique, you will die. He crushed her hand even harder. Hanabi stopped resisting once the pain became nearly unbearable. She let the chakra in her arms and feet die out. She resorted to glaring at the man, ignoring the pain in her hand from his tight grip. She still did not understand how the man had blocked her attack so easily. The look on your face is asking, how did he stop my blow, correct? The man didn't even wait for her response. Chakra theory is quite fascinating to anyone who studies it religiously. Anything made with chakra, he recited, can be destroyed with chakra. I just dispersed your gentle fist techniques by forcing even more chakra in the reverse direction. This is quite similar to how gentle fist users repel blows from other gentle fist users. It's quite simple. There was a pause, gazing intently at her. She couldn't see his eyes through his mask, but she could feel his look on her. Well then, he inquired as he strengthened his grip. Will you beg for mercy? Will you plead for your life? Save your breath. Hurry up and just have your way with me, she spat out defiantly despite having fallen on one knee from the crushing pain in her hand. Even while completely outclassed, she would go down with pride. Hurt me, rape me, kill me, whatever you want, she spoke with gritted teeth. It felt as if all the bones in her hands were being crushed to dust. It's not like you'll get your way with a woman any way else, she taunted. I bet that's the reason why you have your face covered. Women probably run away from you, screaming their heads off. It was an immature insult and one that would do nothing to change the situation, but Hanabi couldn't think of anything else to show her defiance. She gasped as a wave of killing intent washed over her for the first time in their one-sided battle. She found herself unable to breathe or even struggle anymore. She fell to the ground as the man let her hand go. She found herself looking straight at the man as he grabbed her chin with one hand and forced her head up. Hurt you? I have already done so without even trying, the man said slowly as the killing intent continued to increase. Hanabi held back a whimper. Rape you? There was a small pause as he gazed at her. I have no desire for what your body has to offer. Do not insult me. Tell me, girl, would you sleep with an insect? Not able to control herself once again, Hanabi screamed in anger and started kicking him while attempting to pry the man's fingers off her neck with her badly injured hands. She could accept that there were stronger people than her. But she would not take insults to her pride. She was not a worthless insect. She instinctively channeled even more chakra into her eyes. She could barely move, but maybe if she wished it enough, she could burn him to death with her eyes. Perhaps she was weak, but she was not pathetic. Kill you, was it? I like that look in your eyes. It would be a waste if you died. Hanabi's vision changed for a second and she thought she could see red eyes behind the mask. Then she saw black. Chapter end. And that's how this Naruto what if could unfold. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out more alternate timelines on the channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.